like to start this public hearing. First of all, Supervisors Shafani, Fisher, Barney, and Cassiola are in attendance. In addition, our Assistant Manager Jack King, our Township Engineer Dan Dazeroth, and our Solicitor Gretchen Moore is in attendance. First, I'd like to remind you that when you get a chance to talk to the microphone, please limit it to the 3 minutes so everybody gets a chance. I don't want you to have to make me holler. I have to holler enough at my wife and kids at home. I don't want to do it here. We also will have 3 experts that's going to testify initially up first. And I want to remind you, this proposed ordinance is for future well pads. It's not for any of the current wells that are going on right now that are kind of giving us the issues we're having. These are for future wells. There are currently no pads proposed by our drilling companies yet. Not to say there won't be someday in the future, but these couple areas you see on the map, it's just what we came up with our township engineer that seems to work under the criteria that we established for him. And I think he's going to go over that again about how he came up with these couple areas based on criteria rather than just certain setbacks. This hearing was advertised on May 23rd and May 29th as we're required. But before we get to the testimony of the professionals, our solicitor has a couple comments to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to put on the record a couple procedural comments about advertising and the process that we've gone through thus far. So this is the third in a series of hearings. We held a hearing on April 3rd, on May 8th, and now tonight on June 5th. And my understanding is that this is not the last hearing, and the board is not voting this evening either. But all of those hearings were advertised in the newspaper, even if they were not required to be because they're continued hearings. They were all advertised. This ordinance has been sent twice officially to the county and local planning commissions for their comments, and I believe it was also sent another time more informally to them. Additionally, we have made mailings to property owners who are affected by the overlay district, again, as a precautionary measure. We did mailings to them as well as postings of those properties, so that has been done before this hearing and will be done again before the next or continued hearing that we have. So there's just that word on process for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Our 3 experts tonight are Dr. Christopher Long, Dr. Judy Hess, and Chad Karolewski. So first, Dr. Long.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Good evening.
Could you even bend it closer to yourself just so everybody in the back can hear?
My name is Chris Long.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, will you do that, please?
Yeah, anybody who's going to offer testimony tonight, please raise your right hand and be sworn. You tell me the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you for that reminder.
Okay, good evening. My name is Chris Long. I'm a principal at Gradient, which is an environmental and health science consulting company based in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm here tonight on behalf of Range Resources to provide an overview of a long-term ambient air monitoring study that was conducted by consultants to Range at the Augustine well site. I'll also share a few preliminary observations regarding the air monitoring that is ongoing at the Schultz-Bernard well site. I've done my best to compress a lot of information into a 10-minute presentation, so my apologies if I'm moving very quickly through everything. Before I talk about the air monitoring study, I just wanted to share a few words about my background. I've been with Gradient about 23 years now, where most of my work focuses on indoor and outdoor air quality as related to both characterizing potential air pollutant exposures and assessing potential human health risk. Prior to Gradient, I completed a doctorate in environmental health at the Harvard School of Public Health, and I also have a master's degree in environmental engineering from MIT. I'm a board-certified toxicologist. Let's dive into the air monitoring study. This slide summarizes some key aspects of the study, which was an ambient air, meaning outdoor air monitoring study conducted during all phases of development and production of natural gas and natural gas liquids at the Augustine well site. There were about 2.5 years of air monitoring that was conducted between July 2019 through December 2021. It included about 6 months of air monitoring during the production phase. The monitoring study was focused on the measurement of both fine particulate matter, known as PM2.5, and individual volatile organic compounds, VOCs. There were 2 PM2.5 and 5 VOC air monitoring sites that were located a little over 200 to 940 feet from the nearest wells. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but on the site plan here, the 2 PM2.5 monitors are indicated with the green squares, and the 5 VOC monitoring sites are indicated with red triangles. There was also a meteorological tower for measurement of different meteorological parameters, including wind speed and wind direction. This slide breaks down the air monitoring methods. There's both downwind and upwind air monitoring sites were located following federal siting criteria. Continuous hourly PM2.5 monitoring was conducted using well-validated beta attenuation monitors, or BAMs. In total, there are over 40,000 hourly PM2.5 measurements made at the 2 PM2.5 monitoring sites. For VOCs, 6-day air samples were collected for laboratory VOC analysis according to EPA method TO15. Each air sample was analyzed for 62 individual VOC compounds. There were low sub-part per billion detection limits. In total, there were over 40,000 individual VOC concentration measurements. Something I'd like to emphasize is that the measurements are not specific to PM2.5 and VOCs from Augustine well site emissions. The measurements instead reflect reflect cumulative air quality impacts of Augustine well site air emissions, as well as from other local and regional air pollution sources. This idea is developed a little bit further on this slide. Essentially, air emissions from Marcellus Shale development are not unique, and they're ubiquitous in indoor and outdoor air due to a number of common indoor and outdoor air pollutant sources. This idea is illustrated for a couple of the VOCs that were measured, benzene and toluene, as well as for fine particulate matter. I'm not going to read through all of the sources, but any combustion source will produce benzene, toluene, and PM2.5. In addition, there are a number of common household sources of all of these different air pollutants. Let's dive into some of the measurement data. This slide shows averaged PM2.5 concentrations for the 2 monitors for the different well development phases. These average PM2.5 concentrations are conservatively compared to the US EPA annual PM2.5 National Ambient Air Quality Standard, shown by the dashed orange line. This is a health-based standard that's set by EPA. The annual NAAQS, National Ambient Air Quality Standard for PM2.5, was lowered from 12 micrograms per cubic meter to 9 micrograms per cubic meter earlier this year. This comparison that I'm showing is conservative because the NAAQS is for a yearly averaging time, while the durations of most of these well development phases are for less than a year. Regardless, other than for the well pad construction phase, where PM emission sources will be similar to those for other types of construction activity, you can see that average PM2.5 concentrations for both monitors are consistently less than the annual average NAAQS, showing that PM2.5 emissions during well development phases like drilling and hydraulic fracturing, as well as during production, did not contribute to PM2.5 concentrations exceeding the health-based NAAQS at the 2 monitoring sites. This graphic is quite complicated. I know. I'm going to walk you through what I'd like you to take away from it. First, I'd like you to focus on the blue versus the green bars, which reflect the comparison of the daily average PM2.5 concentrations measured at the two well site monitors to those measured at the rural Pennsylvania DEP Florence monitoring site in Washington County that is classified as a regional background monitor. There are two plots here. The upper plot is for PM Monitor 1. The plot below it is for the second PM monitor at the Augustine well site. You can see blue bars are for days where PM2.5 measurements were above regional background PM, and green bars are for days where measurements were below regional background PM. And you can see that the green days outnumber the blue days for both monitors, meaning that the two well site monitors frequently registered daily average PM2.5 concentrations that were consistent with regional background. This is particularly true of active well development phases, including horizontal drilling, hydraulic fracturing, and drill out and flowback, as well as the production phase. Very briefly, I'd like to move to some of the results for VOCs. Where overall, measured VOC concentrations were low and frequently below detection limits. As shown here for plots for benzene and toluene, when measured concentrations are averaged to represent longer-term average concentrations representative of chronic exposure, they're generally below chronic health-based exposure guidelines, like the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, chronic minimal risk levels, the ATSDR chronic MRLs. Very briefly, I've also taken a look at preliminary air monitoring data that's been collected at the Schultz-Bernard well site. This study is a little bit different in terms of the design as compared to the Augustine well site. Here, 14-day ambient air samples are being collected at 4 sites, essentially in each cardinal wind direction around the well pad, with laboratory analysis for benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, and xylenes. These are known as the BTEX compounds. This study is ongoing, as I mentioned. Currently, there's about a year of results that are available through the start of the production phase. More than 50% of the results are below method detection limits. Detected concentrations are low and below both acute and chronic ATSDR minimal risk levels. To wrap up, I'd just like to leave you with a few key takeaways. First, a robust network of air monitoring sites was established around the Augustine well site perimeter to provide over 2 years of PM2.5 and VOC air measurements during well development and production. Overall, the available air monitoring data do not indicate that Augustine well site air emissions contributed to elevated increases in long-term concentrations of potential health concern for either PM2.5 or the measured VOC species. Preliminary results from a similar air monitoring network at the Schultz-Bernard well site do not provide evidence of BTEX-related air quality impacts of potential health concern. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you for that. I would hope the DEP is able to take this information and help us with that. I mean, it's kind of above some of the things we do, but again, I hope they have this information, and I hope they use it, you know, how they're supposed to use it. Do they get all this information?
I know that all of the data are publicly available on the Range Resources
Well,
website.
I mean, publicly,
so
doesn't the DEP monitors that more so than we do? Does the DEP, is this sent to them, the data?
I can't say. I don't know.
All right. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a few questions?
Go ahead.
Okay, so right off the bat, one of the things that you said was this study at Augustine was conducted by consultants. Was it conducted by you or by other consultants at your company?
The actual kind of design of the air monitoring network, the collection of the data, that was done by other consulting companies. I know that Woodard and Curran was one of those companies. I believe Clean Air Engineering may have also been involved with the PM2.5 sampling. My role and Gradient's role was to review the air monitoring data.
Okay. So to be clear, Gradient is an expert service, not an environmental company. So is it true? Is that true?
No, that's not true. Gradient is an environmental and health science consulting company. We do a variety of different environmental consulting work. We do expert witness work, but that's just one piece of the work that Gradient does.
So your primary business is not to provide experts to companies. Gradient's primary business is not to, is what you're saying.
It's one part of the work that we do, but I would describe Gradient as we do traditional environmental consulting work. We do product safety work. Gradient's very active in a number of different areas related to both environmental and health science.
Okay. Is it true that Gradient published research that attempts to discredit the known link between health effects caused by asbestos, lead, and arsenic?
I wouldn't. I mean, Gradient.
It's really a yes
Gradient
or no question.
Gradient is a company of scientists. Gradient does routinely publish work in scientific journals, but the purpose of the work is to review and interpret the science. I would disagree with the way that you phrased it.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Sorry, just trying to get my train of thought here. So just to be clear, you do not have a degree in toxicology, that is correct?
I have a degree in environmental health. I took toxicology classes. I have a certification known as the DAVT, which involves, there are various criteria that you need to meet, including professional, years of professional work. There's an exam that you take to become certified.
Right, so to be clear, I could register for that exam on October 15th, 2024 because I have an advanced degree. There's no requirement to have a degree in toxicology to take the board certification, correct?
There may not be requirements that you have a toxicology degree, but you have to have, there are requirements regarding different types of degrees. You have to have, years of professional experience. So
I'm gonna ask.
I don't know your background, but I'm not sure that you could
Okay,
register to take the exam.
Thank you. So the TO15 methodology required canisters to be replaced at a minimum of every 24 hours. Yet in the Augustine study, it says that they were replaced every 6 days. Was it put in for 24 hours and then read every 6 days, or were they put out for 6 days and then recovered after 6 days?
They were put out essentially every. I mean, it was a 6-day sample. So the human canister was put out in the field, and it collected air over a 6-day period. Then the sample would be collected and sent off to a laboratory for analysis of individual VOC compounds.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking that is the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection specifically talks about TO15, which is the methodology that was used. And it says the method uses a specifically prepared canister and sampler that collects air sample over a 24-hour period. The reason is because when you get into the more details of TO15, it also specifically says chemical reactions between VOCs and substances inside the canister are generally assumed to cause gradual decrease of concentrations over time, i.e. long-term losses over days to week. It specifically says in 3 different sections of this that the canister should not sit out for longer than a 24-hour period because the readings of the VOCs will decrease. Do you agree with that statement?
For some VOCs that are reactive, that may be true. From my understanding, the method is used, sometimes it's used for very short periods of time, 10 minutes, 1 hour. It can be used for 24 hours. It can be used for weekly samples.
You're welcome to read it. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, it shouldn't be left out or unread for more than 24 hours. Also, just bear with me a second. Also, TO15 has the ability to test for 97 VOCs. in both the Augustine study and the Fort Cherry study, which you participated in, you only tested for 62 VOCs in Augustine and 58 at Fort Cherry. Was this why?
I believe the reason why is that Pennsylvania DEP had come up with a targeted set of VOCs for testing in areas with natural gas development. My understanding is that that list was, I think it may have been a little bit shy of 60, and Range used the same target list as used by DEP.
I'll save you some time, but in your own study, you say that the reason that you picked those 58 and 62 was because they were suggested to you by Range.
I don't.
You're welcome to the information. Tio, did you request the MSDS sheets when you were testing for VOCs and fine particulate matter?
I already explained that I didn't do the testing. I reviewed the data.
Okay. So TO15 only tests for fine particulate matter in VOCs over 0.5 parts per billion by volume. So are you aware, is it true that there is no safe level of benzene exposure?
Well, to back up, I mean, method TO15 is for VOCs. It's not for PM2.5.
So is it true, though, that there is no safe level of benzene exposure?
If you assume a linear dose response,
It's a yes or no question. Is there a safe level of benzene exposure?
There are health-based guidelines for benzene. There are background exposures to benzene. We're all exposed to benzene right now from common household sources or from
I understand that, but
vehicle
we're
emissions.
specifically talking about Augustine. Okay. You frequently reference regional background air. And so in both the Augustine study and the Fort Cherry study, which you participated in, is it correct that you used Florence, Pennsylvania as the background air?
I believe we used that when there were data from the Florence site. In that site, there are PM2.5 data, so yes, that's what we used.
Are you aware that the Florence Copan site sits within 1 mile of the Imperial landfill? There's a reason I'm asking if you want me to continue. The reason I'm asking is because are you also aware that the Department of Environmental Protection and the EPA is investigating the Imperial landfill for emissions that are making people sick in Florence?
No, I was not aware of that.
So essentially, you're taking contaminated air that's being investigated by the EPA and the DEP, and you're comparing it to air here and to say that that air is clean. Did you look at each individual chemical, or did you compare them to each other when looking at VOCs?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So when
I
you're
looked at the
looking
results for each individual chemical, yes.
So if you're looking at the level of benzene, and then the level of toluene, and then the level of xylene, did you look at them individually, or did you compare the overall level of all the VOCs that were detected?
I looked at them individually because the toxicity of different VOCs varies.
Did you ever hear the expression, dose makes the poison?
Of course, it's a basic tenet of toxicology.
Right. I've learned that recently. Chemicals interact with each other and have a multiplicative effect, which means that you may have a level of xylene and toluene that are acceptable individually, but when combined, they're toxic. Anything is toxic. If you drink too much water, would you not agree that that could be toxic to you?
Of course, anything with an excessive dose can be toxic.
So if you only compared these VOCs individually and not what you found together, is it fair to say that there may have been a level of exposure that was missed?
I mean, in general, very low levels of VOCs were detected. Oftentimes, they weren't detected above the method detection limits. What you're talking about in terms of either additive effects or multiplicative, those generally occur at very high doses, not add subpart per billion doses.
So you're testifying that you know that the levels that were detected at Augustine over the 2-year period every 6 days was not because you compared them, or because you're just saying, because you just said that you didn't look at them combined, you looked at them individually.
I looked at them individually, yes.
So you didn't. So, for example, I found a study that smokers exposed to asbestos are 10 times more likely to get mesothelioma. That's because of the exposure to smoke and asbestos. So is it possible that the exposure to I don't even want to say benzene because there's no exposure, but like xylene and toluene combined at Augustine could have caused a health hazard that wasn't calculated in that study?
The example you have is a very different case. I mean, you're talking about occupational asbestos exposures,
I understand.
cigarette
It's apples.
smoking, which results in very high exposures to a large number of different chemicals. That's a very different case, and that actually does support what I was saying, that additive and multiplicative effects have generally been observed at very high exposure levels.
Sorry, bear with me. So you've done a number of studies, sorry, bear with me for a second. I'm going to jump around, but you've done a number of studies for industry organizations testified across the country. Have you ever found a problem where you were paid to perform these analysis?
I did a review paper a number of years ago that reviewed air quality data collected by Pennsylvania DEP, academic researchers in the Marcellus Shale area. I believe that paper highlights some elevated concentrations that have been detected.
You believe or you know that it did?
I know that it does.
Okay. On page 4 of your presentation, you say, quote, low subparts per billion detection limits. Low in reference to what? Like low below so it didn't show up on the TO15 test? Or low in that it was low in a range above that 0.5 of parts per billion by volume?
What I meant there is that the detection limits themselves were low. They were subpart per billion, okay, which is a low concentration.
On that same page, you say other local and regional air sources. You even go on to list them. Did you actually calculate any of the other possible environmental factors, or did you just create a list based on possible things? Because when you look, the reason I'm asking again is when you look at Range's information on their website from every 6 days, there are significantly elevated benzene concentrations over days. And go ahead, I'll let you answer that and then I'll ask my next question. So did you actually test for vehicle exhaust, gasoline vapors, tobacco smoke, wood smoke, household products, or any of these other things that you list?
No, and well, that kind of was the point. If you go out and measure PM2.5 or you measure benzene, you don't know where it came from. It could be, some of it could be from well pad emissions from the Augustine well site. It could be from another well site. It could be from vehicular traffic, wood smoke. It isn't possible to say, that a benzene concentration, it's very difficult to apportion that among different sources.
Okay, but because you're averaging it, you're willing to say, so again, the reason I'm asking this, there's no level, and I hate to keep harping on benzene, but there's no safe level of exposure of benzene, and we know benzene comes off of well pads, correct?
Benzene can be in, emissions from a well pad site, yes.
Right. So when you're doing daily averages or averages over a 2-year period, it is possible that there was a significant spike, say for an hour, 1 hour in a day, and then when you average that day or you average that week, it looks like the levels are significantly lower. However, for a period of time during one day, there were very high levels of benzene that somebody was exposed to.
Yes, these are 6-day samples. There could be, shorter-term episodic air concentrations that wouldn't be captured. Generally for benzene, I mean, there is concern about short-term exposures, but I would say that there's more concern about a longer-term chronic exposure.
I mean, I'm not a gambler, but if I were a gambler, I still wouldn't put myself or my family up against any level of exposure to benzene. Bear with me. So on page 9 of your presentation, you say that more than 50% of the results were below method detection limits. Is the method you're referring to TO15?
I believe it may be a different method. I believe these are absorbent traps that are being used to collect the air samples. Off the top, I could look up the method. I don't right now remember
I mean,
what
to
it
be
is.
fair, I did ask when I heard you were coming for the actual scientific study, because I did read your other scientific studies over the past couple of days and was not provided with anything other than the link to Range Resources website. But it's repeatedly said in the Range Resources website, and quite honestly in your presentation, that the method that you relied on was TO15. So does that mean that 50% of the numbers, or 50% of the results were above detection limits, if 50% were below?
Yes, I mean, yeah, roughly 50% are above and below, but again, I mean, the detected concentrations are very low and below both acute and chronic ATSDR MRLs.
Would you agree that the residents of Cecil should not be forced to determine how much exposure to benzene or any other VOC or fine particulate matter is too much? They shouldn't be forced to decide who's to believe and not to believe.
I think that's more of a question for the board here than it is for me.
I think that perhaps another study that actually follows the DEP's TO15 should be performed, and I think that the canisters being left out for 6 days when it clearly says that after 24 hours the VOC diminishes is dishonest at the least.
We'll ask that. We'll ask that of Range.
I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Long.
Thank you.
Dr. Hess? All right.
Good evening. My name is Judy Hess, and I live in Houston, Texas.
Could you speak up?
Can you hear me?
It might help if you take the microphone in your hand. No, keep it in your hand, that might help. Dr. Hess, please keep it in your hand, that'll help.
Okay. Is this better? Okay. Better? Yes? Okay.
All right, let's have her attention.
All right. My name is Judy Hess, and I live in Houston, Texas. I have a PhD in epidemiology from the University of Texas School of Public Health and currently provide epidemiology consulting services following my retirement from Shell in 2022, where I led the company's epidemiology group. I also served as vice chair of the External Advisory Board for the University of Pittsburgh's Pennsylvania Health and Environment Studies, which examined potential health impacts from unconventional natural gas development and other environmental hazards in the area. I would like to share my perspective on the PIT studies from my vantage point as a member of the External Advisory Board, with a focus on whether these studies can effectively inform health-based setbacks. I will also touch on limitations in PIT's cancer analysis and their analysis of non-UNGD sites. UNGD is unconventional natural gas development.
I I can't.
That could be a-
Judy, I'm sorry. I'm having a really difficult time hearing you and understanding what you're saying.
Jack, maybe she could hold it not quite close. Don't hold it just quite as close to your mouth, please.
Yeah,
That might help.
sorry.
Better?
I try it.
Okay. Do I need to go back?
No.
No? Okay. Their analysis of non-UNGD sites that could be addressed by Pitt, I believe, using data already available to them. When funding the Pitt studies, the Pennsylvania Department of Health stipulated that Pitt used the same methods Johns Hopkins used in a series of epidemiology studies they had done earlier in northeastern Pennsylvania. The department wanted to see if similar methods, particularly around how exposure to unconventional development was assigned to those in the study, if these similar methods would produce similar results in another part of the state. The Pitt team did make some incremental improvements to these methods. However, in both the Hopkins and Pitt studies, a person's exposure to UNGD was determined by the distance between their house and unconventional well sites and how many wells there were within a specific buffer distance or circle drawn around their home address. While this may seem intuitive, it doesn't reflect the reality that emissions from oil and gas operations vary significantly over space and time. Using a distance to well or proximity approach for defining exposure assumes that all wells in the same phase of development emit pollutants in all directions continuously without consideration of wind direction or wind speed. For example, two residents living the same distance from a well, one upwind and the other downwind, would be considered to have the same exposure. None of these are realistic assumptions and will introduce error into the study. To add to the uncertainty, proximity metrics defined in different ways have been shown to produce different results. A 2018 Pennsylvania study demonstrated that analyzing the same data using different proximity metrics produced risk estimates ranging from a 20% increase to a 430% increase, depending on the metric used. In my opinion, it is difficult to effectively translate epidemiology study results that used proximity metrics into health protective setbacks without the added context of monitoring data. Thinking back to my example of the two residents, one upwind and the other downwind, monitoring data can shed light on whether a plausible exposure pathway exists. That is, whether the presence of a well is resulting in harmful chemical or physical exposures to those nearby at levels that could increase disease risk. Proximity metrics make that assumption, but monitoring data could confirm it. Furthermore, if disease risk is higher within a defined buffer distance, this doesn't tell you whether the effect is highly localized near the well site or spread more evenly throughout the buffer distance. Monitoring data could inform this as well. And finally,
I'm sorry to interrupt. What was the last thing you said? Monitoring data could what?
Could inform whether an effect is highly localized near the well site or spread more evenly throughout the buffer distance. And finally, the wider the buffer distance, the harder it becomes to attribute an observed health effect to a particular source when there are other point and mobile sources of the same chemical and physical hazards in the area. If these limitations are not considered before a regulatory change is undertaken, a community may incur the cost of a regulation without realizing the desired benefit. As an example, Pitt reported an increase in severe asthma related to proximity to producing wells. Pull it up now. I have one slide for my presentation. This chart uses data pulled from Table 6 of Pitt's asthma report. The blue-gray bars show the proportion of severe asthma cases occurring each year of the study, and the brown area represents annual gas production in the 8-county study area. You can see that the number of severe asthma cases peaked in 2014 to 2015, with about 13% of the total cases diagnosed each year. However, annual gas production in the 8-county study region continued to increase even as the proportion of severe asthma cases significantly declined beginning in 2016. This pattern should be more fully explored and understood because it is not the trend you would expect to see if UNGD caused severe asthma incidents. I would also like to touch briefly on Pitt's childhood cancer analysis. While the Pitt study was being conducted, Yale published a study that found an increase in leukemia among Pennsylvania children who had at least one unconventional well within 2 kilometers of their birth address. The Pitt study results did not corroborate Yale's leukemia finding, even though the study populations were nearly the same. Pitt did find a higher risk of lymphoma among children whose birth address was in close proximity to 1 or more unconventional well sites, an association that has not been previously reported. A child's level of UNGD exposure was based on a home address at the time of birth, meaning that it was assumed the child lived at the same address between birth and cancer diagnosis. The child's UNGD exposure was then derived from the number and proximity of wells around this birth address. For leukemia cases, which are most often diagnosed before the age of 5, this is less problematic than for lymphoma cases, which are more commonly diagnosed during the teen years. The question is, did this approach capture the true exposure level of these cases and controls? The Pitt Cancer Study actually included 2 analyses, one using existing state birth and cancer incidence data, which was the basis for most of their written report, and a second analysis that collected detailed survey data from cancer cases and controls, including their full address history between birth and diagnosis. Almost no results of this second analysis were released because of difficulty recruiting cases and controls, which led to small sample sizes and unstable statistical results. However, I believe there is potentially much to be gained from the survey study data. For example, Pitt can determine the accuracy of using birth address to assign exposure by comparing exposure categories based on birth address to those that would have been based on the child's full address history. This would be particularly important for the lymphoma analysis, since diagnosis was potentially 15 to 20 years after birth. Aside from exposure to UNGD, the study also looked, although not in as much detail, at a broader list of environmental hazards in the region, including the uranium mill tailings disposal site in Canonsburg. A child's exposure to this site was again based on birth address, and then assigned as either exposed if the address was within 5 miles of the site, or unexposed otherwise. If a child attended a school that was within a few miles of the site, but was born outside of the 5-mile radius, he or she was considered unexposed. I mention this not to minimize the importance of studying UNGD-related impacts, but rather to highlight the many environmental hazards in the study region and point out that these other hazards were not given the same level of attention in the Pitt studies. I do not have expertise in radiation science, however, I can read water monitoring reports that are available online from the Canonsburg disposal site and see that when it is described as in compliance with concentration limits, it is in compliance with an alternative concentration limit agreed to by the federal government that is 22 times higher than the EPA's usual maximum concentration limit for uranium in groundwater.
You winding down?
Yeah. And that elevated concentrations of uranium were detected in both ground and surface water during the time period covered in the Pitt study. The detailed survey data collected by Pitt could refine these non-UNGD analyses as well. There's clearly a role for epidemiology studies and policy decision-making. However, the limitations of the studies should be fully understood and appreciated. and further analysis of the PIT data on some of these points would be helpful. Otherwise, as I said earlier, policy changes guided by the studies may not produce the desired outcomes. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my perspective this evening and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Can I ask a few questions? I can go last if you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you started off by saying you're from Houston, Texas. Who asked you to attend this meeting tonight?
Range Resources.
Were you paid to participate in this hearing tonight?
Yes, I was. I was paid for my time and my travel.
You also said that you worked for Shell. Was that for the entirety of your career, or did you have, you said you're an epidemiologist, did you ever work outside of an industry setting?
The majority of my career was within industry. I did work for some period of time at MD Anderson Cancer Center.
Come on, she has the floor, please.
Sorry. There's no doubt that there's flaws in studies. That's proven over and over again. But can you say that UNGD does not cause lymphoma, cancer, asthma exacerbations, or other childhood illnesses?
Epidemiology studies cannot answer a question like that. They can't prove the negative, if that's what you're asking.
You're saying that, if I'm understanding you correctly, that you can't just, and I actually agree with this, you can't just take every site and say that this is the distance like across the board from people's home because of topography and wind speed and varying things, prevailing winds, things like that, correct? That's what you're saying?
That's correct.
But would you not agree that it is not realistic for us as a local government to be able to evaluate every single site after it's there because the impact would already have been established? So until there are studies that do exactly what you said, which I would love to see, would it be fair to say that we need to be most protective of our residents?
I think that the objective is to you want to regulate against the right hazard, I guess is the way I would put it. I think that since these studies, a number of studies have been done on UNGD health effects, many of them in Pennsylvania, and all of them have had the same issues with using proximity metrics. I think until better quality studies are done, I think that there's not conclusive evidence that what you're seeing in those studies can be relied upon for regulatory decisions. I will say that the Health Effects Institute, I don't know if you're familiar with them, it's a group out of Boston, has undertaken a series of studies that hopefully will be released very soon. It's a joint effort funded by the US EPA and industry, and they will be doing just exactly what I talked about. They'll be, they started with monitoring data to understand if there are exposures of concern, if there's an exposure pathway, in other words. And once they conclude that part, I'm hoping those results will be released soon, then they'll turn their attention on health effects.
But when we get to that point, though, drilling is going to seem like it's going to keep going on anyhow while we're waiting to get to that point for those better studies that you talked about. I guess that's our issue.
So knowing what we know about oil and gas and the VOCs and fine particulate matter that comes off of oil and gas development, does it not make sense until those studies are complete to put them farther away rather than putting them close to our residents and hoping for the best?
So what you're describing is a precautionary principle. The alternative to the precautionary principle, which can result in regulations that have a cost to the community, but don't deliver the desired outcome. That's the downside of using the precautionary principle. So.
No. we had a nurse testify before us at the last hearing, and she described how hard it is to watch someone sick. So with all due respect, I would rather use a precautionary principle and know that I did everything I could to protect my residents. And if those studies you're referring to come back and say that it truly is safe, then we can allow it closer. But it's too late once it's there. It's too late after somebody has cancer.
I guess my response to that is, how would you know you're regulating the right hazard? In an environment where there are a number of environmental hazards that are producing the same physical and chemical hazards.
So I'm guessing because you're from Houston, and this is the last thing I'll say, that you haven't had the opportunity to drive around Cecil, but we are a very rural community. So we're not talking about multiple highways or big business, or this is not the city of Houston. So when you're talking about risk factors, well pads are significant compared to what else is around us. So I appreciate you coming here tonight, but I think you're off base.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hess. Chad?
What? I don't have a PowerPoint because I didn't know which way this would go tonight.
Oh,
My name is Chad Karleski. I am a Chad. Sorry. Karolleski. So I was saying my name is Chad Karleski. I'm a research IT specialist at the University of Pittsburgh as a part of the Pulmonary Allergy, Critical Care, and Sleep Medicine Department, and I've spent my last 17 years as a collaborator in COPD research. My talk this evening, when I found out I could expand on this a little bit more, is pretty much based on the last slide presented by our last expert. One of my colleagues, Dr. Sally Wenzel, was a part of the PIT collaboration on the PIT study, and she is noted by the American Thoracic Society as an expert in severe asthma. The PIT study itself, I will speak from. I will say, I am from Cecil here. I am from Lawrence. I'm from Georgetown Estates. And, myself, I am an asthmatic, so is my 10-year-old daughter, but in this aspect, I'm going to talk in a professional sense and not as a resident to keep the respect of this, idea of speaking as a professional. The study at Pitt looked at 20 years of electronic medical record data. These people it was a highly controlled study in the fact that they had to have a primary diagnosis of asthma, whether you were a control or if you were a subject in the study. They had to reside in Southwest Pennsylvania. They must have been prescribed an asthmatic and been on an asthmatic medication regimen. They could not have cystic fibrosis. They could not have pulmonary hypertension. They could not have the paralysis of vocal cords. They could not have bronchiectasis, and they could not have pneumoconiosis. So they took out a lot of the comorbidity as they can that other people could say that this possibly couldn't affect you. Each subject was assigned a control, and that was matched by age, sex, and the date of encounter when they were seen by the doctor, the ER, or the hospital. This study improved, as our previous expert spoke, two ways. One, on the eastern, they instituted buffer zones. The Eastman study, the 2016 study on the eastern side of the state, they took all wells into account. This study took a single well and measured it out at 1 mile, 5 miles, 2 miles, 5 miles, and 10 miles. And they used the more stringent American Thoracic Society, which is the guiding body of pulmonologists' conditions of using a corticosteroid, it's defining severe exacerbation, which is a new prescription of a corticosteroid medication or an increase of dose of that corticosteroid to a patient. They then also created a metric to determine the exposure level based off the distance of the well from the pad to the residence, the average daily production of the well, and then they squared the distance from the pad to the residence, so they even increased it a little bit. And then they used this new standard of creating and breaking into the quartiles of low exposure, medium exposure, and by dividing the cohort into quartiles based on, sorry. I'm sorry, too fast, I will slow down. So this new metric they created was using tertiles, divided by threes of high exposure, low exposure, or medium exposure based on this metric of how far you were from the well, how deep the well was, and sorry, I'm looking at my notes real quick. And it was done for each phase of the fracking process. So construction, fracking, and production, and drilling process, thank you. The models then, after they put them in these quartiles, were then adjusted by social economic status, the year of the encounter, so the age of the participant, the sex, the race, the season of the year, if they smoked, if they had a family history of asthma, the temperature at the time, and if they had type 2 diabetes. The study itself looked at 3 outcomes during the construction, drilling, fracturing, and production phase. For the first level, severe exacerbation was defined as a new medication prescription for a corticosteroid or an increased dosage of the corticosteroid. The second level was severe exacerbations with an emergency room department visit. The third was a hospitalization with exacerbation. So to sum up the results of the study, this more controlled study found a higher odds ratio of 4.72% than the eastern side of the state, and people that were living within 1 mile of the highest tertile, or 1 mile from the well site. Even more concerning is 41.3% of this cohort were children between the ages of 5 to 18 that had a severe exacerbation, which effectively eliminates smoking as a contributing cause of the incident. And also, the biggest time of these exacerbations was the winter, which at that time, the cold air, the barometric pressure would keep the gas level during the flaring process lower. Now, I will say there was no consistent association with the increased severe exacerbations within 1 mile. But they were in the odds ratio, but they were statistically significant, meaning they were under a statistical value of under 0.5. When you moved it up to 2 miles, and that was found that significance was found during the drilling, fracturing, and production phase, meaning while the odds risk did not increase, there was still significant exacerbations. When you moved to 2 miles, the same thing could be found during the fracturing and production phasing, and even at 5 to 10 miles from a well, which we all would be affected of, there was p-values during the production phase. So in conclusion to this thing, having, Hills Henderson Elementary School is close to number 2 on the map. So is this the best idea to put a well in that Georgetown Estates with 382 single-family residents? Is this the best place to put a new proposed well pad because of this being with under, 1 mile is 5,280 feet, and which would easily put both large neighborhoods and schools, exposing other people that come in from South Point and everything else to potentially issues in the future. I'm happy to take questions. I'm not a professional speaker, but
two quick questions. So you said
Sure.
at the beginning, you did participate in the PIT study, or you're just backing up what was said in the PIT study?
I'm presenting, so the state of Pennsylvania, when they did this, when they put out the report on the Department of Health website, they put out there a summary sheet, and then they put out a 44-page detailed report that a lot of times, if you haven't looked at this stuff or lived it, like I have for the past 17 years in lung research, it would go over people's heads. So I just wanted to emphasize,
I'm
that
sorry. And who do you work for again?
I work for the Department of Pulmonary Allergy and Critical Care Medicine
Okay.
in the COPD program. I do have I am on a few publications at the time of things I've contributed to, and the reason why I wasn't at the last meeting was I was at the American Thoracic Society conference presenting a poster there. So,
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Before we take comments from residents, Dan had a couple things he wanted to bring you up to date. We mentioned last month that we will have a new map prepared, which I guess you've seen. It was advertised in the last few weeks before this hearing. And the last time Dan and I think Gretchen described some of the criteria, but I want him to explain it one more time how he came up with the criteria that narrowed it down to these spots. So Dan, please, would you be ready?
Can we see the map? Projected, please?
Can you put that up, Jack? I don't know if you can see those numbers and those distances. I think it's pretty hard. Can anybody see those numbers on the red numbers for the distances that shows to some different plans? I don't know what to tell you other than we got a placard out there that has a full-size map. Whenever you're leaving, you're welcome to look at that up close for your own particular area or your own plan. But can you make it? Can you zoom in at all? Can you read some of those? Yes, sir. Can somebody tell me? Can you? Okay. All right. Keep it as zoomed as you can, Jack, while Dan talks. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Members of the board, as you're aware, I'm the township engineer. The township engineer primarily deals with issues related to the township map. So I was tasked by the Board of Supervisors to look at adjusting the map and sort of doing an analysis, a geographic analysis, using some of the criteria that was presented to me. So at least some of the background related to the map. 5 well pads have already been developed in the township with the ability to extract resources from a large area based upon current drilling technology, which can drill lateral wells up to 5 miles. The existing pads appear to be able to access most of the township with the exception of the southeastern portion of the township. Well pad development should avoid high-density residential villages such as Muse, Lawrence, Hendersonville. Well pad development should avoid newly highly developed residential developments such as Traditions of America, Silver Creek, McConnell Trails, along with other neighborhoods such as Timber Run, Pristine Fields, Mayfair Meadows, and Oak Brook. If the parcels are large enough, property owners could allow development even if a structure exists on their property. So considering those factors, the following process was used to determine areas for well development in the future. All parcels of 10 acres or larger were determined. 10 acres was selected to isolate parcels large enough to have a primary use such as a home or other building, and still be large enough to build a development pad. All parcels that intersected with existing well bores and well pads were removed. All parcels that were within 1,000 feet of existing well bores and well pads were removed. Any parcel that intersects a storm line was removed. Aerial imagery was reviewed to remove anything that cannot be further developed due to existing infrastructure, large buildings, parking lots, etc. And then anything north/northwest of Miller's Run Road, State Route 50, was removed. Then anything within 1,000 feet of obvious major subdivisions and neighborhoods was removed. And then again, an aerial review of the aerial mapping was again used to see what areas could be accessed or drilled from existing pads, which were then removed. Then anything west/northwest of I-79 was removed. The buffer around neighborhoods and subdivisions was increased from 1,000 to 1,500 feet. We removed narrow areas that would have fitment issues based upon typical well pad of 400 feet by 500 feet. And then any remaining areas less than 4 acres, which is a typical well pad size, were removed. And then we added a 1,000-foot buffer from residential structures that would be directly impacted and removed from the areas, from the potential areas. And then we repeated this step, previous step, to look at, again, the fitment issues. So the resultant that the board has in front of them tonight with all the dimensions on it is a map which presents 2 acres, 2 areas for future well pad development in the southeastern portion of the township, which is attached. And that map indicates a total of about 30.3 acres available for pad development. And then just concluding that given the large part of the township is serviced by existing well pads to the north and west, this area of 30.3 acres is approximately 1% of the land in the township southeast of Interstate 79, which is approximately 3,000 acres. That concludes how the map was developed.
All right, thank you, Dan. And pardon me? The waiver, there could be a parcel that has a protected structure on it, but it would be a parcel that an owner owns and he's willing to waive it so he can have a well pad on his property. So, well, I'm just saying that those aren't considered protected structures. If somebody has enough ground on their own property to allow a well pad to exist, they would be taken out of the list as protected structures. What were you saying?
In those zones, like, don't think that you could have a 20-acre parcel, I can't think, like off of Rising Road, and then you could waive your rights and put a well pad there.
Oh, yes, I guess
It's
you're right.
only specific to the zones that were created on
As
this map.
Dan said, once those criteria were established and applied, that's what remained. So that's what really popped to the surface, and that's why we have that as you see it now. And I think it would give some comfort to some of the residents from the original plan where we were trying to show areas 1,500 feet away from a protected structure. This narrows it down, and I think a lot of our residents should be relieved to see the distances if you can read it on your map. I said a lot of them, I understand that. But okay, we are going to give residents a chance to talk now. And again, please respect the 3 minutes so that everybody gets a chance. I know there's a lot of people that want to talk. So who's first, Jack? And please show some courtesy while they're speaking so everybody can hear them.
In the back of your agenda are the rules and procedures, so please familiarize yourself with them before you speak. Good evening. My name is Dr. Lee Patouillet, and I was not paid to be here tonight. I'm a resident of 208 South Point. My wife and I reside at 209 Liberty Boulevard. We are proud residents of 208 South Point. Let me begin by thanking the board and the staff because you clearly have been listening at the April meeting and the May meeting, and The ordinance and the maps reflect those changes, and thank you and for doing that. At the May meeting, 7 of our TOA steering committee members presented extensive research on drilling, along with a survey and petition that we did for our TOA residents. They are part of the official record of the meeting. So, here in the interest of time, I will simply say that we advocated for a minimum setback of 2,000 to 2,500 feet based upon extensive research. We were pleased to see when the most recent map was released, it showed TOA South Point being nearly 4,000 feet from the closest well pad. Thank you. I would be remiss without thanking the 19 members of the TOA South Point Steering Committee for their hard work and for the tremendous support of our residents who keep showing up and demonstrate that you're very interested here in our community and this topic. The TOA Steering Committee has identified a few issues, mostly around safety, and a few of my colleagues will talk about those issues. In closing, the residents of TOA plan to continue to be actively involved in issues pertaining to Cecil Township and our community. For many of us, TOA South Point is our forever home. Thank you very much.
My name is Eileen Leifer, and I am a Traditions of America homeowner. Also, I reside at 117 Liberty Boulevard, Cannonsburg. I, too, want to thank the supervisors for listening to the township residents and drafting legislation that show you value our residential spaces enough to maintain them. As you have probably seen, other communities, such as West Deer Township, have looked at what is happening in Cecil and have said that they do not want to become Cecil Township. We have a reputation, and you, supervisors, have a chance to change that for the better. A 1,000-foot setback is certainly better than 500 feet, but it still falls significantly short of the 2,500 feet recommended by the 43rd Pennsylvania Grand Jury as being necessary to protect residents from risk, especially when we are speaking not just drilling rigs, but a possible compressor station or gas processing plant. Please err on the side of caution and do what you can to protect us. While the map protects my community beyond the 2,500 feet, there are other residential communities that will possibly have to live with gas production activities way closer than the 2,500-foot recommendation of the grand jury. I know you have put a lot of work into these ordinances. It is a compromise, and there are a lot of good things in it. A more resident-respectful map, not perfect. Some improvement in the setback, not perfect. And tighter safety and health regulation, again, not perfect. While I and others continue to advocate for deeper setbacks and greater protections for all township residents, in the alternative, I request that you pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Yes, my name is James Feeney, F-E-E-N-E-Y, 602 President's Drive, also in Traditions of America, Cannonsburg. I do wish to thank the Board of Supervisors for this effort to improve the ordinances. There are critical improvements in the air, water, and soil testing and other provisions which do show that there is a concern for safety and health of the community. So I do support the passage of these ordinances. But there's a couple of issues that first need to be addressed, technicalities I'll call them, but very important. The well pad map that you're showing, it appears that it's referred to as either Exhibit A or simply the attached map in your two ordinances. There needs to be a conclusive identification on this map to make sure it is considered a part of the ordinance. Typically, this is done with a drawing number, revision, and date. So please consider that when you're finalizing these ordinances. Also, just a technical detail, but very important, in Ordinance 240-61, zoning hazards paragraph, it contains the requirement for the National Fire Protection Association Code 104 standard system for the identification of the hazards of materials for emergency response. This is a very critical and thankfully included element in your ordinances, but the particular code number is 704, not 104. So please investigate that further and correct that. Regarding the setbacks, please, I do very much appreciate the fact that you have increased these to 1,000 feet. So that's definitely improvement over the original ordinance. But please consider the future, look into this issue, and from a standpoint of potential hazards, which I do not believe have been identified or addressed. The key thing for anyone to protect yourselves and your loved ones is to be aware of whatever hazards you're around. The hazards that are unknown at this time is the water chemical mixture flowback coming back up through these wells. In addition to that, you have flowback coming from other wells that may be added to this mixture. This contains elements, some radioactive, from underground, and are not being measured to understand their risk factor. This puts not only residents near these wells at risk of exposure, but very certainly first responders, if they need to respond to incidents based on past reported notice of violations to the state DEP. There's been an average of 4% of fracking wells in the state of Pennsylvania that have experienced leaks, some many thousands of gallons. The first responders need to be aware of what they're dealing with to address this issue properly. So in short, just to close, defining the unknown hazards is critically needed to both determine what setback from residences is prudent. And also, you must arm your first responders with the information they need to protect themselves and the community. Cecil Township deserves nothing less. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Board members, good evening. I'm a retired firefighter, and I'd like to try and put this in perspective. Anything less than 2,500 foot setback is like driving your car without your seatbelt on. You think nothing's going to happen, but it usually does. I have personal experience from the beginning of my career of a girl on the Parkway in Pittsburgh not wearing a seatbelt at 3 a.m. She flipped her car, and she was ejected from the car, and the top of her head was cut off. It's an experience that I live with and remember, and I will remember for the rest of my life. That may be an extreme example, but it just shows you what might happen if you don't have your seatbelt on or don't have the setback at least 2,500 feet. Another example is anything less than 2,500 feet, for me, says your home doesn't have a smoke detector. Smoke detectors save lives. It happens every day. I saw it many, many times where residents took the batteries out, knocked it down because it was beeping. Later, they died from the smoke in that fire. Sad but true. Any of you have ever gone to the doctor? The doctor says, you need this blood thinner, you need this heart medication to save your life. How many of you ever said, I'm just going to wait. I'm not going to take that. I'm going to wait and see what happens. Any less setback than 2,500 feet says that same thing. If you trust your doctor and you have heart surgery, you're smart. If you give us less than 2,500 feet, I don't think that's very smart. Multiple studies have been done by doctors from health departments all over the country. They've all stated the hazards of fracking for residences, especially with underlying conditions, children, elderly, but everyone. At the beginning of my military service, I was between 17 and 18 years old. I was exposed to asbestos. Who would have thought almost 50 years later, my wife and I were sitting in a doctor's office and I was told they believed I had meso. It's a death sentence. I had biopsies, I had lung surgery. Thank God, all I ended up with was pleural effusion from asbestos exposure. I now obviously go for a chest x-ray every year and it can still come up. I don't want anyone in this room to be exposed to anything that could compromise them. One last thing I have to say is, remember, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Please keep that in mind.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leah Lipner, a resident of the Tradition of America community. I'm a retired Pittsburgh public school teacher, and I'm retired vice president of elementary schools for the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. I would like to thank Cindy Fisher for meeting with TOA Steering Committee and listening to our concerns and answering our questions. Your knowledge tonight was above and beyond. I would like to thank the Board of Supervisors for adding language in the ordinance to further protect the safety, health, and well-being of our citizens. With that said, you have a large task ahead of you in dealing with setbacks. The language in the ordinances was very, very definitive of what happens when what happens. And I applaud you for that. I've read these ordinances 100 times, probably 10 times today. You have heard from a multitude of Cecil Township citizens asking for larger setbacks. Quite frankly, research shows that to protect the health and welfare of the citizens, a distance from well pads to structure should be 3 to 5 miles. However, I understand that that's not possible. It is now time to give the people what they are asking for. Hear us and increase the setbacks to 2,000 to 2,500 feet from our homes. Anything less is unacceptable. Last time I was here, I heard Range Resources telling all the money they give to the community, to their schools, to whatever, and it probably totaled several $100,000. The tax base, when Traditions of America is totally finished, is $2.5 million. One thing I want to let you know, TOA shows up and we vote. Thank you.
Can I say something really, really quick? I'll be quick. No, it references the money because I've been asked a lot. It's real quick, I promise. I want to say something really quick about the money because I too had a question. There was a representative from Range Resources who came up and said about the money that they give, and I couldn't come up with that amount, and so I asked some questions. In 2019, they gave $650 to Cecil Township. In 2020, they gave $100 to Cecil Township. In 2021, they gave $4,300 to Cecil Township. In 2022, they gave $20,000. In 2023, they gave $7,000, and in 2024, they gave $10,000. So just for a reference, because I couldn't come up with it either, so just so you know.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the Cecil Township Supervisors for allowing me the ability to speak at tonight's meeting. My name is John Bodner, and I don't know what to say in 3 minutes but I'm going to say what I can. When it comes to fracking, I'm not getting a dime in royalty money. I'm not getting any of my gas bills paid. Okay, nothing. Pennsylvania fracks a lot of natural gas from the ground. We're the second highest producing natural gas state in the country. All or almost all of it leaves our state. It doesn't even stay here. Are you aware of that? It doesn't even stay here. We frack. And you know what? There's a lot of things with it. What I know about fracking frightens me very much. What I don't know about fracking terrifies me, okay? We have 86,000 miles of rivers and streams in our state. A third of them are impacted either by surface mining, and that's from the past. We're supposed to learn from the past. Fracking, we're not learning. It's in the ground. It's not going anywhere. Millions of years ago, why are we in such a hurry to frack? Why? It's a matter of, let me tell you, I think about this. You know, we talk about being pro-life. We're pro-life. You know, we want to protect the unborn, which is great. You know, we argue about the COVID vaccine. What's danger? Can you take it or not? But what I know about fracking are the pollutants that it occurs. Benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene, fine particulate matter, silica dust, hydrogen sulfide, nitrogen oxide, volatile organic compounds. You hear it all. Radon gas. You know what? There are birth defects. There are premature mortality. There's poison. There's neurological problems, cardiovascular, cancers, the whole realm. Why would we want to expose us, our wives, our children, our grandchildren, all this? Why do we want it so close to where we live? Do you understand? Why can't we make it a point to be safer? And be safer doesn't mean stop. We all need to heat our home. But why not pause and be safer? That's all. Thank you for allowing me to take this opportunity. Thank you.
My name is Janice Blannock, 16 Jupiter Drive, Cecil. Here I go again, huh? I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, and by now you probably all know my story, but I'll remind you again anyway. I'm a mom who lost an amazing son. Luke was intelligent, determined, kind, energetic, funny, and good-looking. People would tell me he was the whole package, but I already knew that. I was looking forward to a life of happiness, watching him graduate from Canon Mac and move on to the University of Pitt, where he'd been accepted, and then he'd probably eventually marry and raise a beautiful family. I'll try to imagine these words. Are you listening? Your son has cancer, a rare and aggressive pediatric cancer that has metastasized. Your whole world is shattered. Now imagine, almost after 3 years of watching him live a nightmare battling radiation and chemo, you are holding him as he takes his last breath. Are you listening, darling? After pulling yourself out of despair, enough to live and get through each day, you find out that there are other young adults in Canon-Mac who have died from or who are suffering with the same devastating cancer, as well as many other rare cancers. So look, without changes to Pennsylvania law and changes to the Cecil Township Oil and Gas Ordinance addressing environmental impacts of natural gas extraction, more families will suffer. For those of you who are angry about the group Mad Facts that I co-founded, moms and dads, family awareness of cancer threat spike, I say shame on you. Because it's pretty simple. We advocate for greater protections so that our family members and neighbors are protected against harms caused by living near fracking and infrastructure, as well as all the toxic radiation it brings to the surface. There are only so many ways that I can say this, and I've said it many times, but here it is again. Do what is right for the residents of Cecil Township that you were elected to protect and serve. At the very, very least, setbacks at 2,500 feet. Thank you for listening. And please, please hear my words, darling. You won't even look at me.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address the supervisory board. My name is Gary Osefsky, and I reside at 165 Liberty Boulevard. I've come here tonight to speak to you in two regards. One as a Cecil resident, and secondly as a member of Valley Brook Country Club. To begin, and to be transparent, I want to state that I am not 100% against fracking when it is conducted in a rural area away from people's residences and businesses. In fact, my son-in-law works in the fracking business, which supports him, my currently pregnant daughter, and our 3-year-old grandson. So I just want to say I'm not 100% against this when it's done correctly, As a Cecil resident, my wife and I reside in the Traditions of America plan off of Hahn Road. The proposed drilling site adjacent to Traditions of America property is just simply much too close to the residential area. It's already a large and still growing residential community. The health risks to this community that is filled with many elderly residents, some with already existing poor health conditions, could have devastating consequences. Secondly, I am a 25-year member of Valley Brook Country Club, and am currently on the board of directors and vice president of the club. Just so you're all aware, Valley Brook Country Club sits partially in Peters Township and partially in Cecil Township, with more of its property in Cecil than Peters. From the perspective of the board of Valley Brook, the current board of directors is not opposed, just as I said personally, is not opposed overall to the idea of fracking. The board of directors understands that there have been many advances in fracking technology, especially with horizontal drilling. And if the operation was far enough away from the club, at least 2,500 feet, like we're trying to talk about tonight, so as not to be a detriment to the club and its members, the club may be willing to consider gas rates for under its property. I don't see how, knowing the area, I don't see how that could possibly happen with the if it's 2,500 feet, but nevertheless. But I am here tonight to tell you that there is no way that this board or any future board is going to allow for a fracking operation on its property, on the surface of its property, and is not in favor of any operation in close proximity to the surrounding residential areas. Also, I see the new map that has been drawn, and unless my map knowledge has escaped me, which I don't think it has, that number two with the slash lines is actually on Valley Brook property. So as I said, that is, I can tell you, that is never going to be approved at Valley Brook. Given, one more minute? Not more minute? I'm done? I gotcha. The last thing I want to say is I just want to, one last simple thing. Cindy Fisher said it so well earlier when she said, until there are further studies done that are more conclusive to what is going on, why not err on the side of caution? I don't understand why we wouldn't do that. And I challenge I challenge you supervisors to vote with your conscience, as if the pad was going to be next to your property. That's the way I want you to vote.
Hi, my name is Nancy Aloy Edmonds. My husband and I have lived at 1164 Old Farm Road, Georgetown Estates in Lawrence for the past 17 years. It may appear that our community, Georgetown, is late to arrive to this podium. It was only recently that we learned our community was to be targeted as a dumping ground for not one, but two potential well sites less than a half a mile apart surrounding our small community. Lawrence is a small village, and despite the lack of markings as a community on your map up there, it is indeed a community in Cecil Township. Though we are less than a mile radius on a map, there are approximately 1,300 people living in Lawrence. We are working and middle-class families who pay our taxes. A U.S. zip code site says that our population density would be 2,034 people per square mile based on the population in the space that we have. By comparison to most of Cecil Township, that's a lot of souls living in a very small area. Lawrence has approximately 700 homes total, with Georgetown Estates comprising 382 of those, and Hill Station Manor with 81. Most of us live here because we're seeking a safe and quiet community to raise our families and to live out our retirement years. Within this small region is a Blue Ribbon Elementary School, 2 playgrounds, sports fields, and at least 1 daycare. Only a short distance away is a major assisted living facility for the elderly. We are astounded that our own elected officials, who are appointed as the guardians of our well-being, would even consider it as an appropriate area to risk this small but densely populated group. Placing 1 or more well pads within 1,700 feet and or 1,800 feet from our doors would create a cloud of inescapable concentration of toxicity over our heads. No one should have to live like that. Our homes, rather than being a safe haven, will be polluted by emissions that foul our air, our water, and our bodies. Rather than being assets, and for some people, their only significant asset, our homes will be worthless. Who would buy a home knowing that they will be inundated by incessant noise at unbearable decibels, unrelenting truck traffic, and toxic air and water? The people who are behind me in line will speak in depth about the anxiety this threat is producing. They will tell you about their fears as well as the facts regarding human health and safety, the risks to the environment, the annoyance of the incessant traffic of heavy machinery destroying our roads, and the plummeting of our property values. In short, they'll tell you how this decision will represent the diminishment of our quality of life. I'd just like to say in closing, there are already 5 wells in Cecil Township. You're well aware of the violations that occur there. We've given enough as a community to the fracking industry.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Lee, and I live at 1411 Lexington Drive in Georgetown Estates, located in the village of Lawrence. I moved to Georgetown with my family almost 20 years ago from Mount Lebanon to take advantage of Cecil's peaceful environment, lack of traffic, and overall welcoming community. I stand before you today to present our petition to the supervisors, signed by almost 400 residents and several children who asked us to sign. 306 people from Georgetown Estates and 78 people from Hill Station Manor. We created the petition in response to our citizens' shock and concern over the 2 potential well pads that are located within 1,700 and 1,800 feet of our communities and the village of Lawrence. I would like to read the substance of the petition to you, and we'll turn over the signed documents before we leave tonight. In light of the myriad and critical concerns relevant to the fracking industry and its practical impact on real people in real communities, including health, toxic air, water, safety, noise, traffic, property value, peace of mind, and quality of life, we vehemently oppose any revisions that would allow fracking within 2,500 feet of schools or homes. We respectfully request the Board of Supervisors to act responsibly and protect our citizens from undue harm, as they have been elected to do. That's the end of the petition. Georgetown Estates and Hill Station Manor are two developments that are situated on two sides of the village of Lawrence. We have a diverse population from babies not yet born to little kids and teenagers and college students, to young families and not so young families, as well as senior citizens. Our communities are close-knit and come together for pool parties and fundraisers and walking our dogs. We don't all love each other, but we do respect and support each other as people, human beings, with the right to live peacefully and safely and without undue concern for what we have come to expect in Cecil Township. We are a village of real human beings with real human concerns, and we are relying on you as our elected representatives to acknowledge that people count first and must always come before profit. We respectfully request that you revise the oil and gas ordinance to disallow any fracking within 2,500 feet of a home or school in any part of this best place to raise a family community. This is not an arbitrary number. Rather, it is the minimum distance recommended by Physicians for Social Responsibility, who have no skin in the game, and the Pennsylvania grand jury, after hearing many testimonies from families already devastated by fracking and its incessant aftermath.
Deborah,
Years
would you bring
and
us your,
years
would
and
you,
years.
Would you give us your petition, please?
Yes. Can I finish?
No, we got.
We
got people
implore
at the,
you,
we have people at the
each
door
of
that want
you,
to talk.
to do the right thing.
We understand. You made your points.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
My name is Emily Rodovich. I'm a resident at 1495 Yorktown Drive in Georgetown Estates. I'm taking, is that better? Thank you. A much broader view of this issue. I'm speaking here as a remorseful senior citizen who has lived to witness the degradation of our planet. I remember, I probably should have brought tissue, because I remember running barefoot through neighborhood lawns free from cancer-causing insecticides and drinking fresh water from uncontaminated springs. And when a phrase like acid rain was heard, we thought it was science fiction. I remember a time when we believed that the Food and Drug Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency were actually protecting our health and our environment. I have compassion for everyone in this room. Those responsible are not here this evening. Those responsible are the corporate decision makers who rush to implement innovations that will increase profit without first creating procedures for safeguarding the environment and its inhabitants. They know that they can bribe politicians in federal, state, and local governments to rule in their favor. They also bribe the unemployed by offering steady jobs. They bribe landowners and municipalities by offering substantial, or maybe not so substantial, sums of money and promises that often turn out to be false. Their PR messages are designed to have us rationalize in our brains that which feels wrong in our hearts. If you have any doubts about this, I urge you to go to Netflix and watch the movie Dark Waters. It tells the true story of the DuPont Corporation's desolation of Parkersburg, West Virginia, during their process of manufacturing poisonous Teflon kitchen appliances for making food preparation more convenient. Those self-empowering, short-sighted decisions of corporate and governmental elites have befouled our food, the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. The greatest tragedy of all is that we are burdening our children and those yet to be born with these serious derelictions of health and security. We must stand up, and if not now, when? I urge you to do the right thing.
Hello, I'm Diana Hagan, and my husband and I live at 1117 Concord Drive in Georgetown Estates, and we've lived there for over 34 years. I'm here today speaking tonight because I represent one of the adverse toxic health impacts that could happen as a result of fracking. I have had cancer 2 times. The first cancer required 2 major surgeries and 7 minor surgeries over a span of 4 years. The second cancer required 1 surgery and tests every 6 months, which has been 4 years so far. I do not want to ever have cancer again and have myself and family go through the stress and surgeries, nor would I want anyone else to endure what I had to go through. I want to stay away from anything that causes cancer again. I stand here today cancer-free, but that could definitely change with the toxic and adverse health risks that impacts by people living near fracking. Please do the right thing. Remove the proposed fracking site at Valley Brook Country Club. We live in a very high populated area, as some had already mentioned, 380 units, and that's too many people to put at a health risk. We deserve to be happy and healthy like you all are. Please, please do the right thing. Move the proposed well pad from the Valley Brook Country Club. Help me stay cancer-free and as well as many others in Georgetown Estates. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jackie Reitzel. I live in the Georgetown Estates in Lawrence, PA. I'm a transplant. I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for most of my life. I've lived in Georgetown for the past 5 years with my husband. We moved out here for a quiet life. We found out and heard what the proposed sites are, and in my thinking, I thought, what else is going to happen along Georgetown Road? So I mentally went down the road and thought, okay, somebody's looking at the baseball, somebody's looking at the trampoline park, somebody's looking at the horse farm, and I mentally went up the hill and thought, there's the Allegheny Cemetery. So Monday I went up to the Allegheny Cemetery and I approached the head of the head of the cemetery, and I spoke to him. They had no idea what was going on. They were not happy. They're going to have their engineers take a look and find out what impact it could possibly have on them. That said, I'm not allowed to speak for them, but this can definitely impact those who have no voice, those who have fought in foreign wars, those who are now laid to rest and hoping to have a quiet the rest of their days, the rest of the eternity. We do not have the right to disturb the ground underneath them, nor the air quality around them, or nor the sounds that may impact their family. If you go up there at any time and they are cutting grass and there's going to be a funeral, you have to stop cutting the grass while the funeral's going on. They don't allow anything to impact any funeral or anything. So knowing what can possibly happen, seeing that the well sites that are projected are between 3 and 3.5 miles from the cemetery. Who knows how far or how near they can get to this? So knowing how government moves, it may take them a while to come up with whatever they're going to come up with, but in the long run, I don't think we want to impact them in any way, shape, or form. And in my closing, I did want to say thank you to all the veterans who are here and who have served us. Thank you for the fact that we have clean air to breathe, clean water, fresh grass under our feet. Our children can now run. Our dogs in the Georgetown estate are allowed to be on the grass because we are responsible for the fact that the grass is treated with chemicals that are not impacting the dogs or the pets or our children at all. We're aware of that. On the eve of
Ma'am, thank you
80th
very much.
anniversary
No, ma'am,
of Veterans
everybody else
Day.
needs to
Thank
turn
you.
too. There's a long line there, please.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Patrick Sullivan. I reside at 7009 Hill Station Road in Lawrence, PA. In 2019, Cecil Township was voted the 6th safest township to live in Pennsylvania, emphasizing the great work of our police department. I know this might sound corny, but I bought into it. That sign, as I was driving around looking for a new residence in Washington County, made it even more appealing to it, even though I wasn't familiar with Lawrence or Cecil. I know the police do a great job keeping us safe from criminal acts like burglary, car theft, breaking and entering, and other such acts of toward our citizenry. I also know they protect against speeding, because I've tested them several times, and they bat 1,000. But this is an important consideration when choosing a place to live. Also considered and equally important are school districts, cost of living, commuting opportunities, and the quality of the local health care. What isn't on anyone's list that I know of is living next door to an industrial site, particularly when a fracking site in your neighborhood wasn't even remotely considered when you moved in. I'm late to the game, I admit that. I never thought fracking could possibly encroach on a densely populated area. I hope it's not the vision of our community to replace our rural environment of farms, ranches, and suburban neighborhoods with industrial waste sites, toxic groundwater, and deafening drilling. Cecil Township consists of approximately 17,000 acres. Lawrence, PA is roughly 262 acres, or 1.5% of Cecil. It's a small little fraction up there. But we're 10% of the residents of Cecil Township. And I think that should be given a lot of consideration. Beyond talking about just that community, is there any area left in Cecil Township that could be protected now or in the near future? You know, could it happen anywhere? I mean, what is solid ground for not making decisions to continue moving with these sites? I know some of these populated areas in Cecil are safe now, but what if this situations change next year? I appreciate the board's position. I know they didn't make all these fracking ordinances and understand they have not all authority to change some of the laws in place. I know you're trying to make concessions and to make it work for both people. But I would hope our legacy would remain to keep Cecil a safe community, albeit environmental issues included, and desirable place to live. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Patrick.
Hi, my name is Mary Mattis. I reside in Hill Station Manor at 5010 Ashley Lane. Very proud to live there. I took a long time to find that home because I saw all the signs that said Cecil, the safest community or safest township in the state of Pennsylvania. Then I found my home, my forever home, where I wanted to live. Guess what? I just left this paper and I'm talking to you and I'll never shut up. So this could be a long, no, I know you'll give me the sign. I know. All right, listen, I am going to go to the script because I will be too long. I'm here this evening to speak to you from the heart. You know, oftentimes everybody here provided a lot of information, statistics, and impact on health, the valuation of the home, all of those things. I'm here to just talk to you from the heart. So I'm asking you, board members, and anybody else who might have an opposing view to fracking, I'm asking you to put yourselves in our place right now. I don't know if you've been directly impacted by fracking. I don't know if fracking lines run beneath your home. I don't know if there's a well pad right beside your house. I don't know any of that. But I know this. I know that you can empathize with us. I know that you can sympathize with us for the situation that we're in. But can you be us? Can you feel the deflation within our hearts when we heard this news? Can you feel the, I felt like I'm a nobody at this point because who's recognizing us? Who is recognized a small community, which we think is densely populated, between Georgetown, ourselves, and I'm here to represent that small village of Lawrence itself, because you know what? It's a bunch of blue-collar workers, low-income families, and they need representation too. So yeah, I'm gonna do that for them. I'm gonna put all three of our communities together. Our communities are family-oriented. We are very typical blue-collar, middle-class workers. If you walk through our neighborhoods, you're going to see people walking their dogs, people running, people taking care of their yards, just like every community that does not have fracking. We are those same people. So why do we need to experience this? We're not the anti-frackers. We're saying, move your lines to 2,500 feet. Put those signs up. 2,500 feet. Listen, my community, we're older. We're older, and we made a little mistake. We put 2,800 feet, but you know what? We're going to bring that down to 2,500. Okay? So here's the thing. I'm skipping a lot of what I wanted to say here, but I was a health teacher in the Canada-Macmillan School District for 28 years. I loved my job. I loved it. One of the best hidden school districts in the world. It's a great school. I shouldn't say the world, but you know, in our area. Okay? It's a great place to work. And now we're going to affect kids at that Hendersonville school. My back patio, I see kids at recess. I hear them doing their little games. I see art teachers out and their kids are painting and drawing. I see science teachers out collecting leaves. I see everything that can go on there. I see athletics, soccer, baseball. Oh no, oh my God. Okay. Don't make me. All right, listen. I want you to be our hero. I'm going. I want you to be our hero, every one of you. I do not want you to be a zero. I do not want you to be a zero. Be my hero. Be their hero. Be the disabled person that couldn't make it tonight. Be the person that was working tonight. Be that person in Lower Lawrence area that could not afford to be here. Right. I was a coach.
Were you a cheerleader? Mary, were you a cheerleader in high school? Were you a cheerleader in high school?
How do you follow an act like that? I feel like the warm-up that just followed the headliner.
But anyways, I'm Dave Hewitt. I live at 1225 Valley View Drive in Lawrence. I live there with my wife, Linda. We've been there for 10 years. We chose this area intentionally. We could have gone to a lot of places, but we came here. What's that? You can hear me without the mic. Anyways, the whole idea of this was to let you know what it is that we're about and we believe in. But truthfully, we're so far into this that everybody else has really covered it all. So my perspective on this is I didn't really understand what fracking was so much. So in my layman's terms, what I'm finding out, I think, and I'm not paid to be here and I don't have any technical knowledge, but I think a lot of us think that fracking is you inject water into the ground and you push out the gas and the oil. And that's not the case. You push the water into the ground, you crack the ground. You're intentionally creating an earthquake. The whole idea of creating the earthquake is to push the stuff out. Once you have broken the ground, you can't repair it. All right, so we've all seen these little science experiments where you put one jug on top of the other and the water goes in and the other stuff comes up and it balances out. That's not fracking, okay? And honestly, I don't know how you decide what the discernible levels of poisons are, what the acceptable levels of poisons are, you know, who comes up with these and who defines them, but it's all nonsense. All right, what is the acceptable level of poisons, especially for those of us who might have asthma or have other debilitating diseases? All right, so honestly, I think if we just take this for what it is, you've got the whole community here telling you one thing. Your logo, just fiduciarium, all right, for the trust of the people. Trust what we're saying, all right? Get this back, move it out. Again, we probably can't be 100% with nothing, although that's what the goal should be, but let's be reasonable in saying, let's keep us all safe and let's keep us in our homes.
Thank you, Dave.
Hello, my name's Wendy Zapp. I live at 1109 Old Farm Road in Georgetown Estates in Lawrence.
Wendy, you're going to have to speak up. So
Can you
we're
hear me
still-
now?
Yes, that's good.
All right, Wendy Zapp, 1109 Old Farm in Georgetown Estates, which is represented right up there on our map. I am a nurse with a master's degree, so I did enjoy the presentations this evening, the scientific presentations. That's sort of my forte. And I did understand them. And what I understood was we definitely have an undeniable risk for air pollution, water pollution, and undoubtedly noise pollution if you're going to be that close to our homes. Now, tonight I'm here to talk as a neighbor. Anyone who's been through Georgetown or taken a sneak peek at our Facebook page, you know we're a vibrant community and we always have something going on. We have retirees, birthday parties, children, expectant parents. We are a community and we do not want to put each other at risk for air pollution, water pollution, and noise pollution. So how can you guarantee us that 1,700 feet is going to keep us safe?
Thank you, Wendy.
Hi, my name's Elena Zapp. I live at 1109 Old Farm Road in Georgetown Estates. That's in Lawrence, PA. I have witnessed firsthand the devastating impacts of fracking. Oh, I'm sorry. I have witnessed firsthand the devastating impacts of fracking. My fiance and his family live 1 mile away from a pad, his mom and his 2 sisters. They all have asthma. One night while visiting him, his youngest sister collapsed, her airway closed, and she went unresponsive. My fiance had to perform CPR on his 12-year-old sister till the ambulance arrived. Her medical team determined her collapse was caused by the air quality being abysmal, which the pad was the direct cause of. We were granted a miracle that night. I can call her on the phone, talk to her today. Others aren't granted that miracle. You can't guarantee my neighbors won't have to go through this. Would you sleep well at night knowing that this could happen to another family? 2,500 feet, thank you.
My name's Amanda Scaife, and I live at 1153 Old Farm Road. I wanted to speak today because as a resident of Georgetown Estates, it's very distressing that the current proposed well pad sites are less than half a mile from Georgetown Estates, Hill Station, and the village of Lawrence, all densely populated communities. While all of the inherent health, safety, and environmental issues associated with living in the vicinity of fracking sites are of equal concern, a few issues have stuck out to me. As someone who works at an elementary school, the close proximity of the proposed well pads to Hills Hendersonville Elementary School, a daycare, and residential areas with children strikes a particular chord. As other residents have mentioned, studies have shown potential increased risk of lymphoma and lymphoblastic leukemia in children living near unconventional oil and gas development, especially for those living within a 1-mile radius. Additionally, the level of noise exposure produced by fracking has been linked to adverse health outcomes, including depression, sleep disturbance, stress, and cognitive impairment in children. Children who live in Lawrence and attend the school in particular will have no reprieve from the noxious fumes, sounds, and pollutants caused by fracking. As my husband and I are hoping to start a family in the near future, the impact of fracking on pregnancy has been weighing heavily on me as well. According to a Johns Hopkins study, mothers who live near wells face greater risk of premature births, high-risk pregnancies, and low birth weight. Lastly, as an asthma sufferer, the link between asthma severity and development of respiratory illness with living in close proximity to fracking has been troubling. According to studies, those who live near wells are 1.5 to 4 times more likely to have asthma attacks and are at a greatly increased risk for severe exacerbations during the preparation and production stages of fracking. Additionally, formaldehyde and benzene, 2 known carcinogens and VOCs commonly used in fracking, have been associated with depleted respiratory function and symptoms including coughing, wheezing, and lung inflammation in children. For those that don't have asthma and have never experienced an asthma attack, imagine trying to breathe through a straw that progressively gets smaller, causing you to gasp for air. It's not a feeling I would wish on anyone, and yet by allowing drilling close to residential areas, more and more people will be subjected to knowing what that feels like. With all of the things I mentioned in mind, I ask that you do a risk-reward assessment and consider the fact that fracking at the proposed sites would bring only short-term gains in exchange for long-term consequences and health effects. Cecil's current perceived prosperity from the fracking industry will be at the cost of your residents' health and safety and that of future generations. Please ask yourselves if that is a cost you are willing to pay. Thank you so much for your time and for allowing us to voice our concerns.
Good evening, I'm John Kamen. I'm an attorney. I represent the developer of Traditions of America and many of the Traditions of America residents in here tonight. First of all, I did want to say thank you to all the Cecil Township supervisors for the hard work that you put in and for the changes that you made. We appreciate that we are being heard and appreciate the thoughtfulness. I did want to also take a moment to refocus this discussion a little bit about what this is really about. It's about surface right operations. You already have 5 within the township. That is more than necessary, and it's also more than required. To go ahead and deal with an exclusionary zoning type challenge. The issue is with respect to this other side of the township where you're showing the proposed wells, and by the way, again, we are very appreciative of what you've done. You can access this oil and gas subsurface from many other places where you don't have to go ahead and implicate surface operations. It is not a taking, it's merely a focus on what is appropriate on the surface. If you look at, you don't have to have operations in Cecil Township to be able to access the gas that is on this side of the township. In fact, based on my rough math, you can hit most of the township from the existing locations that are already in progress and are permitted as surface operations. You can hit the remaining part of the township from places outside of the township. So this is not about the taking of somebody's gas rights. This is about where you choose to allow surface operations. And I go back to what we argued 10 years ago when we challenged Act 13 in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and won twice, I would add. This is an industrial use. It belongs in an industrial area. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Kristen DuBois. I live in the Windsor Woods development. That is DuBois. Sorry, just like the town out, and I got a lot to fit in 3 minutes, I've been told. Sorry, so Kristen DuBois. I live in Windsor Woods, right next to the Augustine George pad. I'm a mother to 5 children, 2 stepdaughters, 3 of my own little ones. But I'm about to become probably the least popular person in this room, and I've framed my 3 minutes around some talking points from my predecessors that came up to speak. And I just want to combat some of their points or lack thereof with actual facts, and that we can back with just a simple Google search too. Produced water, it doesn't go back into the system. Generally, it's actually used again in completions again. So it's not going to the hydrants, the public water system. They're not going to use it to put out a fire at your house. The seatbelt, smoke detector talk, that's all a scare tactic. What about the DEP regulations that are imparted on the industry? There's plenty, especially Pennsylvania. Look at the tri-state with West Virginia and Ohio. The Marcellus itself, it is the 3rd largest natural gas play in the world, not the US, the world. So to say that you don't want it near your home is just turning its cheek to the needs of your everyday lives. Just how no one wants to acknowledge that EVs are charged by plugging into your house that are powered by natural gas. Not to mention how unethically mined lithium is. We're actually finding ways to take produced water now and pull the lithium out of it. So being, again, a steward. Let's see, what else? Fracking, we aren't learning. That's incorrect. Range Resources completed their first Marcellus well 20 years ago, and I promise you that they have learned since then, and they have been even more regulated since 2004. All of our gas is pushed out of Pennsylvania, someone said. Actually, we're in a repressed state right now where we're having to shut in production because of the lack of gas pipelines. So when we hear the MVP pipeline, all of that, everything that gets shut down in pipelines, we're actually not able to move the gas out of our basin. So we've actually curtailed what we're doing in the basin. On top of that too, someone said emissions. Range actually uses electric, so there's not emissions whenever they do their completions. Yeah, Range is, can I get some time back, please?
Please, take order.
For your number 2, Cindy, about Range's contributions to Cecil Township, does that include everything they've done for North DePaoli Road, the expansion? Okay, can we add that in? That would be great, because that road is 10 times better now that they've been working on the Augustine pad than it was when I moved here.
Wait, stop. She was respectful. Yes, stop. Just listen.
My apologies if you thought I was disrespectful. I just wanted to know if it was included in the numbers.
No, not at all. You're fine.
Erring on the side of caution, once those studies are brought forward, just like this evening, we did have several studies about air emissions and everything. I'm just not confident. Are we going to be able to push them back off and reverse the ordinance? Reversing ordinances it's actually going to be harder to do than actually implementing a new ordinance. The home values in Windsor Woods, I built 6 years ago. Our home values are roughly 1.6 times what they were since we built 6 years ago. So the home values are going up. And we should thank our veterans because of them, we're actually keeping out of being at war with foreign countries, and we truly could be energy independent. And lastly, all of my babies were born at term, healthy and thriving, even while visiting frac locations.
Can you stay there for 1 second, because I want to point 2 things out. First of all, you said changing the ordinance back would be harder. It would be no different than this. So ordinance change, regardless of what they are, or the similar process. Secondly, the Bernard Schultz pad off of Route 980 and the Augustine pad are currently using diesel generators. I visited the sites myself.
Yes, I understand. There are diesel generators there, but their frac fleet is electric.
It's not there, not this time.
On the Augustine, it is.
It was, it's not. We were there. We were just there for a tour. We don't have to go back and forth, but it's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. And about the reversing the ordinance, though, I just meant from the perspective that multiple studies have been put forward in front of you guys, and you're laughing them all off, and they're all scientific experts. So.
Tom, I want to make a comment. I want to make a comment.
Good evening. My name is
Hold
Eric.
on just a minute. I want to make a comment. As far
Just walk out. Go.
I want to make a comment. As far as what range is contributed to Cecil Township, I have it right here. It's $184,116, including $55,157 to the Cecil Township First Responder Organizations.
She turned.
$499 to educational initiatives benefiting Can McMillan School District and its students. $32,410 to sports and other extracurricular activities for Can McMillan students. $42,050 to the township for parks, recreational initiatives, including the installation of the handicap swings at Lawrence Park in the last 5 years. That's not counting the impact fees that we received at $3.5 million from range from drilling. Thank
I
you.
want to respond to her really quick.
Okay. All right.
Wait, hold on.
All right.
I want to
Go ahead.
respond really
No,
quick.
let
Yes,
him go.
really
Go
quickly.
ahead.
I want to respond. So first of all, when I gave the total, I specifically gave the total for the $42,700 that was referenced by the Range Resources employee. There is no doubt that other monies is given to Can McMillan students, but those are not directly donated to Cecil Township. We were asked about that. Second of all, Peters Township, which has zero surface well operations, gets more impact fee money than Cecil Township every year that has 5. So the impact fee money will not go away because we limit surface operations. That is a misrepresentation and not fact at all.
I didn't say it was going to go away. I didn't say the impact fees were going to go away. I'm just stating the course.
No, go ahead.
Okay, my name's Eric Larson. I live at 1156 Old Farm Road in Georgetown Estates in Lawrence. And I had all kinds of prepared comments, and I researched information, looked up. But the only point I want to try and make after all of this is you're asking us in Lawrence, Hill Station, Georgetown, that general area, to live directly between 2 well pads. Directly between. We will get the effects, whatever effects there may or may not be, we don't know. But you're asking us almost to be like an experiment pod with one on this end and one on that end. If the wind blows from the south, it'll come up. If it blows from the north, it'll come down. And I know this is all new. You know, this is all things that we're trying to learn as we go, but please err on the side of caution and, you know, change the setbacks. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is John Henninger. I live at 1156 Old Farm Road in the Georgetown Estate section of Lawrence. I'd like to thank the Cecil Township Board of Supervisors for this opportunity to speak this evening. I want to make a few references from what I was able to learn from Pennsylvania Act 13. I'm not a lawyer. This is some research I've done. Act 13 is the major oil and gas law in the state of Pennsylvania. When it was originally written, it allowed for 0 local control. It also had provisions like gag orders on doctors, so medical professionals couldn't comment on whether they were seeing health impacts from this industry. There have been challenges to the original law that got us to where we are today, and some of the original Act 13 was declared unconstitutional by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 2013. Generally speaking, municipalities can tell operators where they can operate and sometimes when they can operate. They can limit, for instance, truck traffic on roads during the time school buses are transporting students. They can also put requirements on sound and light pollution, for example, too much light when it is supposed to be dark, too much noise when it's supposed to be quiet. A municipality cannot outright ban fracking, and they cannot use zoning to completely block them out. However, there is no requirement or precedent for how much access this industry has to be granted. The Cecil Township Board of Supervisors can, and in my opinion should, be more protective than they have been in the past by establishing 2,500-foot setback distances measured from the edge of the well pad to protected structures like my home. The industry might legally challenge that decision, but a challenge doesn't mean the industry is correct. And I think the township has plenty of reasons to be more protective. Thank you very much.
Good evening, can everybody hear me? My name is Joshua Brown. I'm an attorney with the law firm Lund Medcalf, and just today I've been retained to represent one of the communities that is not listed as a community on this map, and that's Georgetown Estates. Since I was just retained today and everybody else has already stolen most of the thunder, I'll be brief. I've been retained to fight for this community, and I plan on doing that. And one of the first things I plan on doing is getting the transcript from this evening for the expert cross we heard from Ms. Fisher this evening. So.
I'm Mike Eulis from 1107 Valley View Drive. I got to say right up front, I'm not against fracking at all. But you think Range Resources would have had their act together since 2004. They just did a analysis of a study that was completely flawed. The study didn't study anything before the pad went in, it only studied after the pad went in. We have no idea what the facts are. So how are they going to justify having 43 violations since 2004 that they're going to do the right thing this time? They need to do their fracking away from the population, period. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that, because they can't be, I just went blank. They can't be trusted to do the right thing. They've had since 2004 to figure this out, and they're still getting violations. You wouldn't run a business like that. None of us could. We'd go broke. But they are making so much money that they cannot continue, or they can continue all they want because they could throw money anywhere they want to solve the issue. This is wrong. These pads need to be out in the woods. They've got 5 miles worth of horizontal drilling they could do to get the gas they need. I 100% are for fracking, but not like this, period. Thank you.
Kyle Anschutz, 912 Eagle Point Anschutz. ANSCHUETZ. First, I want to say thank you to the Board of Supervisors for allowing this discourse to take place. I also want to sincerely thank everyone who's here to try and keep their community safe. We don't agree on how to do that, but I'm happy that we can have this conversation. It's about what makes this area great. So I already said my name, and we went through my last name. I was born outside of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I have lived my whole life there. I grew up on a small farm, and that taught me hard work and a team mentality was the best way to succeed in life. In 2008, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I spent 6 years overseas, standing up for what I believe in. I made the decision while serving to get my degree in mechanical engineering so I could be part of America's energy sector. In 2017, I earned my degree from Penn State. I joined Marathon Petroleum. I married the love of my life, just north here, Botanic Gardens. 8 months ago, we welcomed our beautiful daughter into this world. If anybody wants to see cute baby pictures, let me know.
Can you pause for 1 second? Do you reside in Cecil Township?
Yeah, in Canonsburg.
Oh.
In the South Point.
Okay. Did you give your address for the record?
Yeah, she has
Okay.
it. Or it's listed there as well. All right. My family's here, my career is here, and my life is here. Being here lets me do things, like I lead a woodworking class at a local makerspace up in Pittsburgh. I volunteer to be a teacher at our junior achievement events. and I volunteer at the local food bank. We're also trying to have an Engineering Explorers outreach program, with the local community, working with the Boy Scouts of America to do that. I'm not here, sorry. I have a salary that allows my tax dollars to stay here and help improve the area that I live and work in. I'm not here to talk about the industry. I'm here because I'm a resident. I believe the best approach to ensure safe, reliable, and environmentally friendly operations is by local leaders and energy professionals working together. Our industry is very heavily regulated already. Adding complexity and multi-layered regulations brings confusion and deters investment. And if there are regulations that are not meeting their intent, I believe our local leaders should lean on regulatory agencies to close those gaps, rather than these processes. Pennsylvania natural gas is already the cleanest natural gas in the world due to competent regulatory authorities. If there's something they're missing, we should provide that. I don't want my local money wasted trying to regulate something that is very complex, and there's already regulations and agencies in place to do so. I have some comments more, sorry. Some napkin math, there was 4 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity generated. 6 more trillion kilowatt hours of distillate product energy used in 2023. We need to evolve. We need to create a more sustainable world. But one of the ways to meaningfully do that in the short term is through places like Marcellus that's right here beneath our feet. And we can do that. And we shouldn't all say, not in my backyard. It has to be somewhere, and we can do it responsibly. Speaking as someone who's younger here, I need a job. I need to support my family. I haven't had time to buy a house. Home prices here are pretty elevated, even with a good salary. I've seen during my lifetime jobs get driven overseas where they produce the same energy products and we import them, but instead they're much more expensive and they're done at much more environmental cost. I want to stand up to protect the jobs that are here and protect us from local government overreach. There was one comment around infrastructure under cemeteries. I'm a veteran, and I don't mind standing in death above U.S. energy infrastructure. In fact, I'm very proud to do so. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name's Scott Bird. I live at 1401 Lexington Drive in Lawrence, in Georgetown. I'm kind of shocked we have to keep going through all these gyrations. You heard from a few people before. There was a lady last time, and we have Jan here. We have actual death that was likely caused by this. There's peer-reviewed studies that from the University of Pittsburgh that state that rare cancers and hard-to-treat cancers, such as Ewing sarcoma and different lymphomas, have plagued the Cannon-McMillan School District. And if that's not enough to warrant some immediate action, changing the distance from 500 feet to 1,000 feet is essentially worthless. Even anything inside of a mile still leaves a lot of toxic air that could be breathed in. I have a 3-year-old son. I have a 3-month-old daughter. I don't want them breathing in this stuff. The different gases, it affects the elderly and the young children, and we definitely want to keep that out of their lungs. The solicitor said, in I believe the first meeting, that the township has a right to enact an ordinance to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. And Tom said in the second meeting that we can't zone them out of existence. That's a conflict. It does appear that we can put safety guidelines in. The solicitor also said we have the right to protect our local environment. The DEP said about 3,000 feet. The smoke and mirrors are going on. We keep talking about noise. We keep talking about traffic. We keep talking about a lot of other things. The problem is there are young people dying. Luke was a phenomenal athlete. Doesn't get healthier than that. That should never have happened. And we're in the beginning stages of more. And I'd say the first bit would be on range resources. But after all these studies and facts, not the range resources experts with their esteemed testimony, but the facts are pointing to a correlation and causation of these wells and cancer. Like cancer above all. The noise, get earplugs. You don't like the flaring, close your blinds. Kids are getting cancer. Like, this isn't good. We have to do something. And you're all aware of this. And Darlene said she'd like Cecil to be the backwoods country-esque. Well, then stop bringing these middle-class neighborhoods in. Like, we want to live here, be part of the number one. By the way, we need to take a revote on that, whoever made us number one. We just want safety. We just want, that's about it. We don't want cancer. We'll deal with some noise. We'll deal with some light. We just don't want cancer. And by the Pitt study, that wasn't busted up at all. It actually made me believe it more. There's a correlation, and we're getting cancer. And we just want our kids, our elderly, and all of us to be healthy. Thank you.
Good evening. Is that on? My name is Bernie Matthews. I'm an attorney. I am here representing 4 of your property owners, Mike Monaco, Tim Walker, Bruce Gazvoda, and George and Debbie Augustine. I know that you have afforded professionals more than 3 minutes. May I take more than 3 minutes representing my 4 clients?
Yeah,
Okay.
if there's going to be a case, there's going to be a case.
Well,
That's
I'm not here. I wanted to address.
That's not for us to determine a lawsuit or a case.
All right, so fair enough. I'll address it as fast as I can in 3 minutes.
Okay.
I wanted to point out, I've litigated these cases in federal court. Half of my practice is in federal court. I drafted the Allegheny Township Ordinance in Westmoreland County that was litigated to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I litigated the Murraysville case on behalf of property owners who actually supported that ordinance. And I will tell you that the Frederick case, which is the Allegheny Township case that went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, was a precedent-setting case in Pennsylvania. And what Frederick basically said was, you are not an environmental hearing board. You are not an environmental body. The environmental issues that you're debating tonight are not properly before you. You cannot zone based upon environmental issues. Frederick made that clear. That went to the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court and to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So what Frederick also made clear is that fracking and unconventional deep well development is actually something that you can regulate through zoning, but it's also in a way that could benefit the community. We established a record in Frederick that actually farms, agricultural lands, are preserved through unconventional wells, because unconventional wells don't take up the type of invasive use that the conventional wells do. Now, once you get into this world of zoning of environmental issues, particularly you're going to start regulating property rights. That's where you end up in federal court. I have litigated property rights cases in federal court for 37 years. The area that you get into is Section 1983 claims. In 1983 is a federal statute that would make individual supervisors and the township liable for taking property rights without due process or without providing compensation. That is why, excuse me, when you have a regulatory taking in federal court, if you look at your map right now, you have effectively created a 1 5-acre parcel where unconventional well drilling can occur going forward. That type of regulation at this point is beyond what is rational. It's arbitrary, it's capricious, and in federal court, you're going to find yourself trying to justify that without any basis whatsoever. The other thing I want to tell you, if you are in a position as a township supervisor, if you're in a position as a township supervisor of regulating zoning in your community, and you focus on the environmental things you did tonight, like, for example, the record you created tonight, where all of your focus was on the environment, what you're doing is you're telling the board, or you're telling a future court, that this board has decided to go beyond zoning, that this board has decided to take property rights, leases that are currently in effect, and void them, and to do it on the basis of
Let him finish, please.
And to do it on the basis of public health, safety, and welfare in areas that you're not permitted to regulate.
But understand, we're not focusing on environmental issues, the residents are. We're just here listening.
Well, there have been many comments made about the need for a 2,500-foot setback. Now, many of you might know that House Bill 170 proposed that. And the grand jury report was the basis for that proposal. You might be interested to know what the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection said about that. The Department of Environmental Protection said, quote, and this was setbacks between 2,500 and 5,000 feet. 5,000 feet for schools and hospitals, 2,500 feet for for buildings. And the DEP...
And then I have something I want to say to him. Go ahead, finish your point.
Well, what the DEP said about that 2,500-foot proposal was, quote, increased setbacks are not supported by any information that establishes that these particular distances afford an appropriate level of protection and appear to have been chosen randomly, end quote. That was their comment on House Bill 170. And House Bill 170 is as far as I know, is still dead. It hasn't been pushed. And the other thing that House Bill 170 said was almost 99% of the state of Pennsylvania could not be drilled if you push those setbacks through. So what you're proposing for your community, you've already established a map showing that you've eliminated all but 30...
All right, I said he can finish. Now let him finish, please.
You've eliminated all but...
Stop.
We're going to keep him up there until he gets to finish.
You've eliminated all but 30 acres. That's been the testimony. You've heard the gentleman from Valley Brook said, Valley Brook's 25 acres is off the table. So now you've established a record of zoning, environmental issues, and you're going to now allow it only on 5 acres where who knows whether it's actually capable of being developed there.
And we heard that for the first time from Valley Brook.
Right. So now you've effectively provided no future development for oil and gas, and you've created a record for it.
All right.
Let Gretchen respond, and then I want to say something.
We got to move on. We have a lot of people, but I want you to submit that. I know you had a presentation to make
Gretchen wants to say something,
to
and I
submit
need
that
to
to us,
say
please.
something. Go ahead,
Well, I'll submit a presentation to you, but
Okay.
here.
Hold on. No, we heard you. Hold on. Let her talk. Go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Gretchen.
I'm sure you're also aware of the Supreme Court case of Gorslein that allows this particular board to decide where it is appropriate in this, their own jurisdiction. And they have that absolute authority to take into account the health, safety, and welfare and to make the decisions that work best for this community. And I think you also understand that they have complete legislative immunity to make decisions when it comes to passing laws. So the threat of suing them in their individual capacity for a regulatory taking is a little bit off base. I mean, this is not in 1983. This is them passing laws that impact zoning, which they are absolutely legislatively allowed to do, and they have immunity to do so.
May I respond?
No.
I'm not allowed to respond?
And I had one question. I think the residents you said that you represent, are they also already getting royalties, and are they already included in leases?
Yeah. So the issue that I would like to respond to is your statement that individual capacity claims can't be filed. That's not true. I represent supervisors in their individual capacity every day in federal court, half my practice. So individual capacity claims can be filed in federal court, number one. Number two, regulatory, as one of the gentlemen earlier said, there's no precedent established that would support an ordinance that in the future allows no gas development. That's what your ordinance is doing. And that's what your residents want. That's what your residents want. And you're doing it under the guise of health and safety when it comes to environmental issues. And that is not your role. You are not permitted to regulate zoning through the environmental issues. And your record is replete with just that.
It is their role to determine where it is appropriate, and that's what they're doing.
Please stop yelling out, please.
But you can't determine where it goes based upon environmental issues.
Sir, let her speak. She was responding to you. Stop. Let her speak. What were you saying, Gretchen, just now? I did not.
I said it is this board's prerogative, and it's their ability to determine where it is appropriate.
Well,
and that's what they are doing.
That is true.
Okay.
It is their prerogative to determine where it's appropriate, but the basis for that can't be on things you're not entitled to regulate. Read Frederick. Frederick says you are not an environmental hearing board. There are a litany of Pennsylvania state environmental laws that have to be followed. And in Allegheny Township, for example.
I want to ask him, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Would you agree that drilling is an industrial use?
No. In fact, read the case law.
Okay, stop.
Drilling is not an industrial use.
Would you agree that?
Can I answer your question further?
Sure.
Here's why drilling is not an industrial use. In the Frederick case, it was established that farming and oil and gas development is coexistent. And in fact, unconventional wells allow farmers to preserve their farms. They use the money to preserve their farms. Otherwise, they would sell their farms and develop it for residential houses or other invasive uses. That was determined in Frederick, and that was the record that was created. So it's not true that industrial uses are connected with oil and gas development. That's not what the court held.
All right, listen, Mr. Matthews, we have to move on. I wanted to close at 9 o'clock, and we have a few more people who want to talk. Just present that with us, and understand we're listening to what you're listening to also.
Yeah, if I may, I brought with me the maps.
No, you're done. Sit down. Sit down.
I was going to give you the maps
Sit
from
down,
Murraysville.
please. Sit down.
I think it might be helpful for you to have them.
We have the maps from Murraysville. Sit down, please.
Okay.
Give us what you have.
Do you want it, Mr. Casiola?
Yes, give us what you have. Please submit. Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir. Jack, bring him up.
Well, after that, I think what I want to say is a whole lot different. But just to start it off,
Can we have your name for the record, please?
Yeah, I was going to say, my name is Mark Litzel. I live in 1163 Old Farm in Georgetown Estates. Lived there over 20 years. We're in our second home that we've lived there now. So you could say we kind of love living in Georgetown Estates. On top of that, I've been on the board, the association board, for over 15 years. And I've been the president for approximately the last 6. I say that because I really appreciate your positions. I understand how difficult it is to make choices. And I get it. You know, I always try to do the right thing, even though sometimes that can be really challenging. I totally understand that. I've seen fracking firsthand. I've seen the dangers. I've seen the grief. My sister lives out in the Cross Creek, Avella area. That area has been just ravaged with mining. Noise, traffic, trucks, issues with well water, all the illnesses that people have shared tonight. It's just a shame. And, in all due respect to the gentleman who just went before me, he's entitled to his opinion. It's just one I don't agree with in any way, shape, or form. So, in the last meeting, there was discussion about how Peters Township and South Fayette may have really tough ordinances. Things may or may not hold up in court. I get that. I want Cecil to have the same thing. Maybe it'll hold up in court, maybe it won't. But I want it to be as tough to do this in Cecil as it is to do it in Peters Township and South Fayette. I had been in sales a lot in my life. Whenever there's challenges, whenever there's goals, there are very difficult goals, and then there are goals that aren't as difficult. If you're trying to hit your quota, sometimes you're going to go for the easier goal. And right now, between Peters, South Fayette, and Cecil, we're the lower goal, right now. So I think we need to change that. We want you guys to fight for us. For the traditions, folks, I was here at the last month's meeting. You guys put up an amazing fight, and congratulations to you, and thank you for coming again tonight. You've kind of led by example, and I think we're going to follow that example. So, I guess I'm just going to wrap it up because it's been a long night for everybody. I just learned about the details and how close things were with the fracking a month or so ago. That's on me. I should have known more before. But fighting for us is on you. And all I'm going to do is simply ask that you do the right thing.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, good evening. My name is Karen Bryan, and I'm at 30 Ridgewood Drive. I am a 30-year plus employed with the oil and gas industry. We're your friends. We're your coworkers.
Please speak
No,
into the
I'm
mic.
very
It's tough to
proud.
hear.
I'm very
And please-
proud to be part of.
Please just address us at the board table.
Okay, I'm
Thank
very
you.
proud to be part of the oil and gas industry. I am not affiliated with Range. I've worked for public oil and gas companies, private oil and gas companies. Currently, I work for my husband, who has his own oil and gas company, and we drill in populated areas, not in Pennsylvania, but in Ohio. We are highly, highly regulated. And I invite that. Yes, we get sued, we get fined, and that's a good thing because it makes us better. It makes us better. So I don't say that I am an expert by any means in the production of oil and gas, but I am in the oil and gas business. And there's a lot of comments in the last 2 hearings and tonight for increased setbacks. And I respect those who share that perspective, but I wanted to bring some facts. One reason that was cited as a need for increased setbacks is to protect groundwater or water supplies. Well, that's a valid concern. The good news is that the facts, science, and studies around the potential water impacts from natural gas development have clearly shown natural gas development does not negatively impact water quality. For example, please, I was respectful to you. Please, the Susquehanna River Basin Commission has been monitoring water quality in the basin since Marcellus Shale development first began. Consistently, they have not found any negative impacts on water quality, and in fact, have seen some water quality improvements. A 2018 study by Yale University concluded that development of gas from Marcellus Shale was an unlikely source of methane in water wells. A 2017, a Duke University study that was commissioned by the Natural Resource Defense Council found that the evidence from comprehensive testing consistently found no indication of groundwater contamination related to Marcellus Shale gas development over a 3-year study. In June of 2018, Penn State University reported that the groundwater chemistry they studied in one of the area's most heavily developed shale gas, an area with 1,400 new gas wells, was not getting worse with time, but may have actually been getting better. A University of Cincinnati study found in 2018 that there is no relation between methane concentration or source in groundwater and proximity to active gas wells. For those with concerns about water contamination, there are valuable studies conducted by respected organizations and in some cases funded by environmental groups.
All right, Karen, hey, thank you. We got to move on.
Yes, I say I vote no for the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Hello, Michael Studd, 5015 Furwood Drive, Canonsburg. I'm a resident of Oak Brook Estates. Last time I was here, I talked a lot about what was heard in terms of the experts, and then also, again, talked about what I think many of us in the room and many people that I've spoken to have also spoken about on the side, which is we still feel that
Someone stop that.
Sorry.
Someone has to stop that.
Whose phone is ringing?
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. No, we feel that still, it's a no-brainer to pass a regulation that gives us better protection. We talked last time about maybe the only way you wouldn't do it, and I said would be if you had a conflict of interest. And I think that when I went back and I watched some of the old hearings, just to go back and see, like, what numbers are we talking about? And I come from a community, and I've also met with other individuals that are on boards of other communities that have taken surveys of their community. So what's the number? What are we talking about? And those, every community that took a survey, if you go back and watch the footage, it was 84 to 86%. That's 84 to 86% of the residents wanted more protection, wanted this change. So all we can do as citizens here in Cecil is speak and let you know what we are asking for and vote. And I can promise, and I said this last time, I'm putting together a group. Anybody that votes for these greater protections, I will greatly support you amongst our coalition. You can speak to our residents. We will do anything that I can do to support you to be elected on this board. For anybody that votes for themselves and not for the 84 to 86%.
Michael, we don't get involved in politics here. If it's something to do with the oil and gas ordinance, please stick to that.
Okay, well, that's a point, though, that I was making. And I think it is important to say that do anything that we can.
Not here, not here. It's an oil and gas hearing right now.
Understood, and that's a consequence of the vote for the oil and gas.
All right,
so at least that's how we feel.
We are going to finish with that lady at the end.
I'm the last one to speak.
No. Go ahead.
Kara Sheridan, 58 North DePauli. First, I just want to say thanks to everybody for being here. I was unnecessarily brought to tears thinking about what would it be like if all of you were here in 2017. What I wouldn't be dealing with on a daily basis. And I ask you all to stay in tune with what's happening here. I've been fighting this battle for 10 years. I've been asking for this forever. And finally, because people stood up and put their butts in these seats, we're being listened to. So thank you, first and foremost, for that. Second, I'm not going to trust anybody who looks me straight in the face and tells me that oil and gas development is not an industrial use. Everything you say after that sentence means nothing to me. I'm not going to trust a study that was done by a company who, Dr. Long, as he stood here, was unable to say one way or another. His company produced a study, multiple studies, that talked about the fact that asbestos, lead, and arsenic do not cause negative health effects. I'm not going to trust someone who says studies were done about water quality. I'm going to trust my neighbor who says his water quality is worse since oil and gas moved into town. There's a couple of things specifically I want to say about Dr. Long's study that maybe it didn't resonate with everyone here. They said they capture the air and they put it in a canister for 6 days, in which period of time the concentration of that chemical is decreasing. They are not being honest in the study. They did that study when the Augustine well pad had its green fleet on site. Anybody who's been listening to me complain, it is 1,000 times worse. The smells, the noises, everything is 1,000 times worse this time than the last time. They're basing it on inaccurate information. They're representing something that is not a fact. It is not a fact now, and they have no reason to have to adhere to using a green fleet in the future. They took their best day and they measured it on their best day, and then they're going to bait and switch you and pull in other types of equipment, take other types of strategies, use other types of third parties to do a worse job. That measure me on my best day. They're looking at averages, not peaks. They're not looking, they're looking at the data in a way that is junk science, that says, I'm gonna take a 6-day average, and I'm not gonna talk about the peaks where it was really bad. I'm gonna average that out over whatever period of time I think might be appropriate to make it look not as bad. That's way number 4 that they made that study less effective. And then the last thing here is just, and I'll let it go, because I'm over time. But thank you all.
Thank you, Carol.
Michelle Stonemark, 40 North DePauli. I first would like to request to be an expert witness up here because I currently live 500 feet from a well pad, and I feel like I could give the best expert testimony of anybody here because I can tell everybody, answer anybody's questions about what it's like, what it smells like, what my house vibrates like, what noise it is. Anything. I can answer anybody's questions because I'm pretty sure there hasn't been anybody, except for maybe some of my neighbors, that are any closer than I am to an existing well pad. That being said, one thing I would like to thank Dr. Long, I mean, a lot of what Kara said was going to be my comments too, but one thing I would like to thank him for is that he called his study, and he is a hired range contractor, right? He called his study a long-term study. His 2-year study was a long-term study. Yet every time anybody comes in from Range Resources to talk to me, they say, it's short-term. Your inconvenience is short-term. It's temporary. Well, I've been dealing with it now since 2017, and he himself called it long-term. So that sure isn't short-term to me. If your study is long-term, then my effects are long-term. And that's exactly what I'm experiencing now. And I shouldn't have to, and I understand what the lawyer who said, that you can't weigh on environmental issues. Maybe you can't, so don't. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to take into the effect that 2 weeks ago, the DBAs at my house, not the DBCs, not the low-frequency ones that shake my house, the DBAs at my house hit 90 during the day, 90, and averaged at about 85 to 87. We have about a 5-minute video that covers it, but the whole expanse of it was over 20 minutes. And this board, in its capacity, can't do anything about it. And Range isn't going to do anything about it because they're self-policed. So if that's acceptable to you, that I should be sitting in a house where there's 90 DBAs, 90, which is like, it's like me screaming at you right now all the time for the next 20 minutes. That's what it's like. 90 DBAs. That's what it's like. And they're held zero responsibility. They're held to zero responsibility. So I'm not going to sit here and ask you to change this ordinance because of any environmental reasons. Please don't. Please base it on the fact that it is noisy and vibrating at my house at all times. That I go outside and I can't let my kids go out and play because it smells like diesel in my backyard. That I have to worry, that I don't worry about possibly something happen. I worry every time my kid coughs, oh my God, is something worse wrong than just a cold? Like, I'm hoping my kid has COVID. That's what I pray for, because I don't want my kids to end up with the crap that we know happens at well pads. And just for everyone to know, you don't have to worry about you guys. I'm 500 feet from Augustine, and I'll be 900 feet from Connor Samuel. So I'll be the guinea pig all y'all need. I'm not trying to say that to be mean. I'm just saying, so they'll know well ahead of time how bad things are, because I'll be there. I'll be the one suffering the consequences, me and my kids.
Kathy Romano, 48 Ridgewood Drive, Cecil, Ridgewood Heights. I spoke last month, and when I said these are federal exemptions, Tom said, oh, those are federal, Kathy. Well, these exemptions go from federal to state to township, okay? They're federal exemptions, but the oil and gas industry is exempt. I want you to, if all of you that are fighting and everything and did research, you need to research the exemptions that they have. There's 7 of them. I'm going to tell you the top 3, and you go look for the rest. But the top 3, they are exempt from the Clean Air Act. They are exempt. This is the oil and gas industry, who probably couldn't frack if they didn't have these exemptions. The Clear Water Act. The Safe Drinking Water Act. Okay, those are the top 3. I'm going to read There's 4 other ones. That's all I'm going to say, okay? And if you think that they're, spending tons of money, they are exempt from these items. That's all. Thank you.
Nadine McKean, 230 Coleman Road, McDonald, PA 15057. I live 1,932 feet from the Augustine well, and these are numbers from Range Resources, and I will be 2,400 feet from the Connor Samuels well when they start to work there. So I'm a little bit in Michelle's range. We are the guinea pigs. We are in that range of questionable activity, but I'm just here to state that the fact that I live with, there is noise 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every time you walk out of your house, you hear the well. It hums, it chugs. At night, sometimes it makes big clanking sounds that literally wakes my husband up, who could sleep through anything. It's an irritation, it's a nuisance, and I don't think it belongs, like so many have said, in an area where people are living, trying to live their lives. We bought 10 acres. We lived in Cecil for 37 years, but we bought this 10 acres to live out a nice, peaceful existence, and that is not happening now. So I just hope that for everyone else's sake, things get changed, and maybe someday, somehow, some of us will get out of this nightmare. Thank you all.
Hold it. Jack, hold on 1 second. I need her to put something on the record too, and then we'll finish up. Would you do now,
sure.
question, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to read into the record some of the Supreme Court's decision in Gorsling as it related to local municipalities making decisions. I'm just reading part of the final paragraph of Gorsling. The court said, as the dissent fairly acknowledges in Robinson 1, which is the case they referenced earlier this evening, a plurality of this court recognized that the protection of environmental values is a quintessential local issue that must be tailored to local conditions. To this end, the municipality's planning code permits the governing body, which are these people, of a municipality to amend its zoning ordinances to permit oil and gas development in any or all of its zoning districts. The governing body must, however, actually amend its zoning ordinance to permit drilling in designated areas, setting forth whatever limitations and conditions it decides are appropriate for the protection of its citizenry. So, again, basically the Supreme Court is saying it is for your local governing body to decide where it is appropriate. It may be very different from one municipality to another municipality, depending on the local complexion, the topography, all things that are unique to your municipality, but it's their ability to make those decisions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Sarah Martik. I live at 2003 White Oak Circle in Canonsburg, 15317. This is now my third time providing comments, but every time I come here, there's more and more to address, so I apologize for being a repeat commenter. One thing that I wanted to address from early on is how unreasonable it is to attack the proximity approach when we're looking at how we measure oil and gas impact on people's health. For example, when we went to the study release at California University last year, we asked the researchers, why did you not include any metrics for exposure to radium-226 or 228? And their response was, there was no way to control for that exposure in the environment. So realistically, there are more exposure metrics that should have been studied and likely would have shown more harm. But if we ask the state, and I've been doing environmental justice organizing work since 2017, if we ask the state to start truly tracking all of our exposure, industry would fight us tooth and nail. They would never stop fighting and pushing back on our asking the state to make new regulations and new laws that keep us safe. They fight all the time. The bill that's in the House right now for increased setback distances, why do we think that was killed? Every elected official at the state level in this area, every House member and our state senator receives money from the oil and gas industry. And that's not just campaign contributions, which we can track. That's also all of the wining and dining that they do in Harrisburg that is unlimited. So there's a lot of reasons why we are in this situation. One thing I want to make sure that you're hearing here is that we're asking for 2,500 feet because that's what we think we need. The studies are looking at a mile, which is significantly larger than 2,500 feet. Yeah, 5,000, sorry. So 1,000 feet is not a compromise when the playing field is already tilted toward industry at the 500-foot level. That's how the Oil and Gas Act came about. Industry lobbied to get the 500-foot setback distances that are in Act 13. And every single regulation that we've gotten on top of it has had to come at the cost of our organizing and litigation that people, everyday people, are taking on because they care about each other. So the political playing field is not level, and it's really important to recognize that. So 1,000 foot is not a compromise between both sides of what's happening here. 2,500 feet is the only way that we're going to maybe make some kind of step toward keeping people safe. And then we actually, in the time since the last hearing, I've heard from a lot of residents, gotten a lot of emails from them, and there was one person who particularly who had an issue with the sign, drill a well, bring a soldier home. And he's not here tonight, and I wanted to just kind of bring some of those comments in here. This person is a veteran who has lung issues from his tour in Afghanistan, and he's concerned about air impacts living here. He's also concerned about his PTSD being triggered because of the noise and the sound vibrations. So while that sign has a big, strong message, there's other messages that aren't being heard in this forum. So please consider those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Will Tomeyer. My address is 108 Ashland Court, and that's McDonald, PA. I've lived and worked in Cecil Township for most of the past 16 years. Well, I've lived here the past 16, and I've worked here most of them. And including my last 5, in my current role as Director of Economic and Tourism Development for the Washington County Chamber of Commerce. I appreciate you allowing everyone the opportunity to speak here tonight and to provide varied perspectives on this important issue for our township. With a diverse economy and sustained growth, Washington County has been a leader in Western Pennsylvania over the past decade in job creation and economic development. The natural gas industry has played a significant role in this growth, and Cecil has been at the epicenter of this positive economic activity. South Point Business Park is home to a number of corporate and regional headquarters for this industry, and not even beginning to scratch the surface of taking into account affiliated oil field services and professional services providers that work directly for the natural gas industry. The family-sustaining jobs and tax revenue created from this industry are significant to our township, county, and state. In addition, the shale gas revolution has made the United States a global leader in natural gas production, with Pennsylvania the second leading gas-producing state, and Washington County, the second in the state. It is accurate to say that we are a leader in the cause of energy independence. Cecil is home to many companies in an industry that has made our country more secure and less reliant on fragile or hostile regimes and unpredictable dictators in the Middle East and elsewhere. As a resident and through my work, I have seen firsthand how the development of this resource supports the economics of our local communities. In addition to family-sustaining jobs, our friends and neighbors benefit from the increased use of natural gas through low electric and heating prices. Our municipalities and county benefit from the impact fees, which keep taxes low and further improvement projects. And the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office estimates that Washington County is one of the top counties in the state for natural gas royalty payments received by private landowners. On top of the economic and employment benefits realized by the industry, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania maintains one of the most comprehensive and stringent regulatory programs in the country. Beyond these state regulations, many of the companies that make their home in Cecil are using best-in-class technologies and have been pioneers for implementing industry-leading best practices that go beyond even what is required by the government. Should the board choose to change the oil and gas zoning revenue, I would just encourage you to find a common ground that supports both the industry and also protects and respects the citizens of Cecil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Walker, and I live at 1860 Racing Road. We've lived on Racing Road for 40 years. We bought an old dilapidated farmhouse and an old neglected farm, and we worked hard for the next 40 years to save that house, raise our children in a township that we sincerely love. I'm the first one to tell someone from out of town that we have the best police force and the best first responders. That being said, I am a leaseholder now, but many years before we were a leaseholder, I noticed that the farmers in the area were putting new roofs on their barns and buying new tractors. We don't go on vacations. We put the money right back into our farms because we love this area. I totally empathize with all of you as far as your safety, and my heart goes out to you for the loss of your son. I am truly sorry. Our township has 17,000 acres. There has to be areas that don't impact people right next door, that we can put these gas wells and not chase them out of our township, but still have them here to help us grow as a township and be safe as well. Thank you.
AC, I want to tell you, in 3 minutes, if you carry
Yes,
on like
sir.
you did last meeting, you will be removed. So just
Roger
know
that,
it.
sir. AC Rowland, 52 Sycamore Street. I will say that we need to keep up with the facts that we now know. We once had some of the stiffest ordinances in our area, and Range still found the ability to drill. So let's do that again. Let Cecil Township lead the way and have the stiffest ordinances once again. Why are we not looking into biodiesels and other green technologies to meet our needs? There are better ways. And I just want to thank Gretchen for all of her hard work. We have people out there saying that you're getting too many hours and too much pay when you already get about 12% less pay than a man doing your same job. So thank you, Gretchen. Don't let them bring you down. And I'm proud to give you my tax dollars any day of the week as long as you keep defending us and honoring your job and doing what we need to be done and keeping us straight with our legal obligations. And shame on anyone that tries to make you feel like your job isn't necessary or that you're being overpaid. If we're going to be sued, by God, I'm glad you're our solicitor. And be on the side of caution and presume all of these operators in industry do not have our best interest at heart, but their bottom line. Please don't let greed win. Thank you very much.
All right, we are going to recess the hearing. We are going to reconvene at 6 p.m. on July 1st. If there are no major changes, we can and may vote on this ordinance at our regular business meeting on July 1st, following that hearing. So we're in recess right now. Thank you very much.